I had just finished a 24-hour shift, my hands still smelling of disinfectant and the sweat of people I'd helped keep alive. When I got home, all I wanted was to open the fridge for a little milk, but my daughter-in-law leaned in to block me, her eyes colder than an ER at 3 a.m. "Don't open the wrong one. This fridge is mine." She slapped a bright red label right onto my milk carton. "Crystal, do not touch." Behind her, Tyler, the son I raised on cup noodles during night shifts, murmured, "Mom, from now on, please buy your own stuff." I froze. The two people I loved most now spoke to me like I was a stranger. My daughter-in-law turned away, her voice light as ice water on my heart. "Next month, you should find a place that fits your age. We need quiet." The house I bought with countless overnight shifts suddenly felt foreign. I didn't cry, didn't argue. I just felt something drop and shatter inside my chest. I went to my room, locked the door, and opened the safe deed to the house. Savings book, provisional will, all intact. I smiled faintly. They think I'm weak? Fine. In a few weeks she'll be begging me to open that fridge door, and when that day comes, I'll be the only one holding the key to this house. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Marion Blake, 67, an emergency nurse with over 40 years at St. Mary's Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. I've watched people wrestle with life and death and learned to stay calm inside chaos. But I never imagined the worst pain wouldn't come from the ER. It would come from my own kitchen. I used to believe that after my husband died in a construction accident, every sacrifice was worth it. Tyler, the skinny asthmatic boy, grew up and had a family of his own. I just wanted to help them start smooth, share my roof so they could save and build a dream. But now, that very home is where I'm being pushed out. I went to my room, took off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The oak floor still smelled clean, but inside I was ice cold. I pulled out my phone and took photos, the red label on the milk, on the butter, even on an orange in the fridge. "Crystal, do not touch," slanted, messy letters, as if she were marking territory. I saved everything, not for revenge, but because my gut told me I'd need proof. From the kitchen I heard Crystal, "Marion, next time remember to buy your own. People pay for what they use." "No, Mom, no. Mrs. Blake, just Marion, bare and empty, like I was a renter." I answered quietly, "All right." My reply was soft as a breath, but inside, something was shifting, slow, steady, and burning. That night, I sat on my bed remembering 20 years ago, holding feverish Tyler in my arms through a brutal asthma attack, running through rain to borrow money for medicine, living on instant noodles for 3 months to make payments on this little house, the house that now holds both the couple and my humiliation. I used to think my son's happiness was enough. But is a mother's love meant to be trampled like this? Around 8 o'clock, Crystal called from the living room. "Mom, I'm making steak tonight. Oh, and I'm thinking of selling your SUV, okay? The cash can help us go to Miami next month." I stepped out and saw her in the warm light, stirring the pan like she'd said something ordinary. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, went back to the office, locked the door, opened the safe, and checked every paper. The deed was in my name, savings, retirement accounts, provisional will, everything intact. I closed the safe, the metal click like a silent promise. From now on, no one touches what I built. At dinner, Crystal set the table and called Tyler down. I sat quietly, listening to them talk about trips and lavish plans, as if money fell from the sky. Tyler glanced at me and said softly, "Mom, Crystal and I are trying to create some privacy. Maybe you should consider renting. Somewhere quieter and more comfortable for your age." "Privacy?" I repeated, my voice sounding like someone else's. He avoided my eyes and looked to Crystal. She gave a triumphant smile, speared the steak, and chewed slowly, like she'd just wrapped a perfect surgery. After dinner, I washed dishes in silence. Hot water ran over my cracked hands, and I thought about how many times these hands had held the dying and told them, "You're going to be okay." Tonight, I needed those words more than anyone. Night fell. The house went still. I lay listening to the wind against the window. Then a small sound made me open my eyes, the rip of tape. I stepped softly into the hallway and peeked into the kitchen. Crystal was peeling old labels and sticking new ones onto pots, pans, and plates. Each ash-K of tape felt like it sliced my skin. I went back to my room, sat at the desk, and opened a small notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Journal starting today. Everything they say and do, I'll record." Not for revenge, but to protect the truth. I texted Nora Patel, my longtime nurse friend. "Nora, can you swap shifts next week? I need 2 days free for family matters." Nora replied almost at once. "Of course, Marian, are you okay?" I stared at the message, pressed my lips together. Not yet, but soon. Before sleep, I opened the closet and took out one of Tyler's old shirts, the tiny superhero tee I'd saved from when he was 8. I pressed it to my chest. Tears welled but didn't fall. "Son, I've protected you all your life," I whispered. "Maybe it's time I protect myself." The nightlight cast a soft gold on the wall. Outside, the wind hissed through the oaks. I checked the clock. The hour hand had just touched midnight. In that moment, I could see the road I'd take. Silence tonight. Reasoned counterattack tomorrow. I spoke to myself like a vow. Silence tonight is the lever for tomorrow. Then I turned off the spancer. Light and lay down, my hands still smelling of disinfectant, my heart heavy. But in the middle of that pain, a small flame flickered, weak but stubborn. If I've survived hundreds of life or death shifts, I'll survive this house. The next morning, Texas sunlight slanted across the kitchen window. I started toward the bathroom to wash my hair and stopped. On the shampoo bottle I'd used for years was a small pink strip of tape, neat marker letters, "Crystal, do not share." I looked at the towel shelf. Paper towels and laundry detergent had the same labels. Even the hand soap pump was wrapped with a note stamped "Owned." Crystal stood in the kitchen, hair in a bun, coffee in hand, smiling thinly. "I just want to avoid confusion, you know. Everyone pays for what they use seems fair." I looked around my house, the sink, the cabinets, the bathroom shelf. Everything felt tagged like a claimed territory. The only thing missing was her name stuck onto the air I was breathing. I didn't respond. I poured a glass of water, drank it down, and went straight out to the yard. Morning light wasn't enough to chase the chill inside me. Tyler sat at the table, sipping coffee from the machine I bought last year. The one Crystal once said was, "For guests only." Now it had a red label stuck to its side. "Crystal, owned." I looked at my son, hoping he'd see something wrong. Tyler just shrugged, detached as if watching clouds. "I think you're overreacting, Mom," he said, sounding tired. "They're just labels. Not a big deal." I set my cup down, the ceramic tapping softly on wood. "Tyler," I asked slowly, "since when do I need permission to use my own things in my own home?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Crystal just wants clarity. You know how she is organized, likes everything neat." I smiled the smile of someone who already sees the crack in the wall. "Organized?" I said. "You're right, but sometimes people label things to own them, not to tidy them." Tyler went quiet. I turned away and said nothing more. At noon, when Crystal left for work, I gathered the kitchen trash to take outside. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside was the bag of groceries I'd bought yesterday. Milk, eggs, produce everything unopened, tossed in whole. On the bag, in thick black marker, expired unsafe. I checked the milk. The date was a week out. Lettuce still green, eggs uncracked, not expired, intentionally discarded. I took a deep breath and snapped photos of everything. What I felt wasn't pain anymore, it was cold. cold like an early morning OR when they prep to cut, except this time, the thing being cut out of a life was me. That afternoon, I took a small USB drive thin as a coin and buried it in the flour jar on the kitchen shelf. It held all my photos, recordings, and receipts, every piece of proof of the labels they'd stuck on my life. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it, but I knew this. If the truth ever got twisted, that USB would speak for me. Toward evening, as I started dinner, Crystal clicked in from the door, her heels crisp on the wood. "Marion," she said loudly, "we need to be clear. Whoever pays decides. You get that, right? I work all day. I can't cover everything." I turned and looked straight at her. "So tell me who's been paying the electric, water, and internet for the last 3 months?" She frowned but kept the sugary tone. "You're forgetting we all live together." I only smiled. Not because it was funny, because I'd heard the confidence of someone who doesn't know where she's standing. After she went upstairs, I opened a drawer and pulled out the stack of bills. Power, water, internet, every one, in the name of Marion Blake. I started counting. Nearly $420 a month, 3 months straight, all from my account. I wrote the totals in my notebook and drew a red line under, "Who's the real payer?" That night, taking trash out, I ran into Mrs. Gutierrez, my next-door neighbor of over 10 years. She was watering her roses, looked up at me with a careful sympathy. "Marion," she said softly, "I don't want to meddle, but I heard Crystal telling someone she's moving you into senior living because it's cleaner and easier to manage." I stood still, my hand tightening on the trash bag. "She actually said that?" She nodded, a little hesitant. "I thought you should know. Young people forget we still have the right to decide." I thanked her, tried to smile, but my chest felt as hollow as the trash bag I'd just dropped. That night I sat by the window, streetlight leaking through the thin curtains. Tyler and Crystal were asleep, but her perfume lingered in the house, cold and cloying, like something fake. I scrolled back to an old message from Nora Patel. "Marion, you should meet my friend attorney Avery Chen. She handles homeowner rights and unlawful occupancy." I typed quickly, "Avery, this is Marion Blake, a friend of Nora Patel's. I need to meet about a matter involving property and homeownership rights." After I hit send, I stared at the screen for a long moment, not because I hesitated, but because I knew the real game was starting now. Near midnight, I turned on the living room light. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock tick. I knelt, pulled back the small rug under the coffee table, and lifted the floorboard section I'd built years ago for important papers. Beneath was a hidden compartment, wrapped tight in plastic. I took every original house deed, insurance, bank books, and put them inside. I left only copies and harmless papers in the safe. I closed the hatch and slid the rug back. The wood's dry click was firm and final. Sitting up, I looked around the room, every corner, every bulb, every item still mine, even if someone else was trying to stick their name on every spoon. I exhaled slowly and whispered to myself, "You want to seize? I'll show you how soft takeover turns into a hard counter." Outside, the night wind rattled the oaks, leaves tapping the window like a warning. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I've lived through 4 decades of ambulance sirens, watched life slip through my fingers, and still stood up. A woman like me, who has handed breath back to so many, won't be shoved out of her own home by a few labels. I turned off the light and walked back to my room, strangely calm. Tomorrow, I'll meet Avery Chen. Tonight, I'll write 1 sentence in my notebook to remember. When someone slaps "do not touch" on my things, they've just touched the last limit of my patience. I closed the notebook, set down the pen, and smiled. Outside, it was still dark, but I knew morning would come, and this time, the light would lean my way. The next morning, the house was pin-drop quiet. Crystal left early. Tyler was still asleep. I took the chance to tidy the living room, a habit I kept, even though no one thanked me for it anymore. Sunlight slipped through the curtains onto the coffee table where Tyler had left his laptop and a mess of papers. I was only going to dust, but when I pulled the drawer, a small catch sound stopped me. Something was jammed. I tilted my head and pulled harder. The drawer slid halfway out, revealing a bundle of papers stuffed in fast. On top was a stack of receipts from hotels, restaurants, and fashion boutiques in Austin and Dallas. The amounts: $620, $980, even $2,300 at a jewelry store. All under the name Tyler Blake, signed by him. My heart pounded. Tyler's pay couldn't cover this. I sat down and carefully sorted each sheet. In the pile, I found a handwritten loan note on yellowing paper with both our signatures. Tyler Blake borrows $35,000 from Marion Blake to open and firefight auto garage. Repayment term: 24 months, starting June 2022. The corner still showed the ballpoint dent from the day I signed, my hand trembling with emotion. I remembered it clearly: Tyler's birthday, his hug, "I'll make you proud, Mom." I'd cashed out part of my retirement early to help him. 2 years later, the garage never opened, and the money never returned. I clenched the paper, then smoothed it flat on the table. Right beneath it, a glossy flyer for a luxury downtown condo with a red circle around: "Deposit once Mom's house is sold." I stared at that line, the room's air thinning. Next to it, a printed text thread. Crystal must have printed it to strategize with Tyler. "Crystal, don't push too hard. Let her feel cramped and then transfer. The more she fights, the more alert she gets." Tyler: "I know, but she seems suspicious. Crystal, leave it to me. An old nurse won't hold a house when no one needs her." I put a hand to my chest to steady my breath. Every word felt like a cold blade. I read them again, hoping I was wrong, but no, my son had planned with his wife how to edge his own mother out of her house. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Noon light bleached everything out. In my head, one small voice: "Don't lose your composure, Marion. Don't let them see you break." I took my phone, photographed every page, every line. Then I put everything back exactly as it was, careful as if I'd never touched it. Before closing the drawer, I saw an unsealed white envelope in the corner. I eased it open: 2 comped dinner for 2 cards to a high-end restaurant. No need to guess who the 2 were. I stood, slid the drawer shut. My hands were cold, but strangely not shaking. The sharp pain in my chest was still there, but it didn't drag me down. It pushed me to stand upright. I walked straight onto the porch and drew a long breath. The oaks out front swayed, leaves whispering, sun dappling. The steps. I remembered the day Tyler moved in with Crystal. They said they wanted to help me feel less lonely, that my house was too big, wasted on one person. I believed them. I opened my door, my heart, and my bank account. And now, the very people I welcomed in want to shut the door on me. Around midday, I called attorney Avery Chen, the one Nora had mentioned. Her voice over the phone was light but firm, the calm of someone familiar with family property fights. "Mrs. Blake," Avery said, "the most important thing now is to stay calm and keep your evidence safe. Don't confront them. Don't say anything that tips them off." "I've photographed everything," I said. "Texts, receipts, the loan note." "Good. Back it up in multiple places. If you can, send me copies via secure email. We'll meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my office." Her voice steadied me. "Avery," I said softly, "they're my son and daughter-in-law. I don't want to destroy their lives." "Mrs. Blake," she paused. "Sometimes protecting yourself isn't revenge, it's stopping people from doing worse. Especially when they're using your trust as a tool." I was quiet a moment. "You're right," I said. "Thank you, Avery. I'll be there." That afternoon, I pulled out my old notebook and opened to the first blank page. On the faint lines, I wrote small but firm, "Soft takeover plan begin." Below it, I listed bullet points. 1. Fridge labels to seize use. 2. Food discarded to make me feel I don't belong. 3. Money personal spending, old debt unpaid. 4. Language Marion instead of mom. 5. Goal pressure me to voluntarily leave. I stared at those lines a long time. Crystal's face flashed in my mind, leaning against the fridge, lipstick dark, eyes contemptuous. Maybe she thinks I'm a frail old woman, easy to steer like a patient to be neatly placed in assisted living. She was wrong. I'm the one who has held on to people's lives, steady-handed and blood-soaked, and still made decisions. If I survive that, I'll survive her little game. That evening, Crystal came home late. I heard her heels on the floor, the light laugh while she called someone. Yeah, next week. He said he'll hold the unit if we close fast. I stood in my room listening and struggling to believe it. That condo, exactly the one from the flyer with the red circle. I didn't confront her. I recorded the call quietly, then set my phone down. As she went upstairs, I pulled the USB from the flower jar, backed up all the new photos and audio, and tucked it back. I heard her laughing with Tyler in their room, the laugh of someone who thinks she's already won. What they didn't know was the real fight hadn't even started. Late that night, I sat on my bed with a mug of mint tea. I looked at my hands, the ones that had held surgical tools, and steadied so many lives now trembling because of my own son. I took a deep breath and smiled slightly. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew I still had strength to push back. I picked up my phone and texted Avery. I have clear evidence. I'll come in tomorrow morning, she replied briefly. Good. Don't let them know you've contacted me. Get some sleep, Mrs. Blake. Tomorrow will be long. I set the phone down and looked around the quiet room. Outside, the night wind gently moved the curtain. I touched my notebook, where the words, "soft takeover plan," were still fresh. My heart still ached, but my hands had stopped shaking. I turned on the small lamp and wrote one last line. Tomorrow morning, meet Avery Chen, 9 a.m. This will be the starting point. I closed the notebook, set it by my pillow, and lay down. The clock ticked steadily. Inside me, nothing felt chaotic anymore, only a steady silence. They think I'm just a gentle old woman, easy to shoo away like an old knick-knack, but they'll soon learn that. Inside me is still a nurse who has fought death and has never lost. I closed my eyes and let the darkness hold me. Tomorrow, everything begins. And this time, I'm the one in control. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Texas sunlight slipped through the curtain, pale as old paper. I made myself a cup of black coffee, drank it in silence, then chose the brown coat my husband used to love, the one thing that steadied me in chaos. Today I would meet Avery Chen, the person Nora said, will help you see your boundaries again. I arrived at the office just before 9 a.m. A small sign read, Avery Chen, attorney at law, property and family rights. No luxury, just a neat room scented with strong coffee and shelves packed with volumes of the Texas statutes. The smell of paper, ink, and coffee blended together, and it felt like stepping into an operating room where you don't save bodies, you save dignity. Avery greeted me with a slight smile. She looked in her early 40s, black hair tied back, silver-rimmed glasses. Her voice was low and clear. Please have a seat, Mrs. Blake. Nora filled me in briefly. Start from the beginning, every detail matters. I took a deep breath and opened the file bag I'd prepared all night. I laid each item on the desk in order. Photos of labels on food, shampoo, the coffee machine, shots of my groceries thrown in the trash. A copy of the loan agreement for $35,000 signed by Tyler. A luxury condo flyer, with deposit once Mom's house is sold circled. A printout of messages between the two of them about making Mom feel cramped so she'll transfer. And finally, a 3-month household cost summary, all paid from my account. Avery stayed quiet while I talked, jotting notes now and then. When I got to the messages, my voice caught, but she didn't interrupt, she just nudged a tissue box toward me. When I finished, she leaned back and laced her fingers. "Mrs. Blake," she said slowly. "Legally, they're occupants at will, staying without a lease or ownership. That means you can terminate their stay at any time, as long as we follow Texas notice requirements." I looked at her, holding on to every word. "So, I can ask them to leave?" Avery nodded. "Completely lawful. And we'll do it by the book. First, a notice to vacate giving the required time to leave. At the same time, we can demand repayment of the $35,000 plus interest and consider emotional distress damages if they escalate." I touched the edge of the desk, feeling blood moving stronger in my veins. For the first time in months, I heard words that made me believe I wasn't powerless. Avery leaned in, softer. "However, I want one more approach, a psychological one. Instead of pushing them straight into a fight, we'll make them see the consequences if they keep going. I can show them the civil and tax risks so they understand that the sell mom's house scheme isn't just unethical, it could be a chargeable offense." I smiled slightly. "You plan to scare them?" Avery answered calmly. "Not scare, Mrs. Blake. Just put the truth in daylight and let them fear themselves." I sat still, listening to each word. Most of my life I've been an observer of patients, people, pain. I knew she was right. Sometimes people don't stop out of kindness. They stop because they fear the cost. After we covered the details, Avery set a pre-printed packet in front of me. "This is the authorization so I can act on your behalf. The file opening fee is $1,500. You can pay now or by transfer." I took out my checkbook, wrote quickly, and signed. When I set the pen down, my hand was steady, a rare feeling since my husband died. Avery watched me for a moment, then said, "I need you to keep all documents confidential. Don't let them suspect you've hired counsel. If they find out, they could move assets or destroy evidence." I nodded. "I understand. I've backed everything up to a USB and sent copies to my friend, Nora Patel." Avery gave a brief smile. "Good. You're a step ahead of me. But please be careful. Cornered people do reckless things." Her voice turned grave. "And remember, never argue alone. If they get heated, leave the room. Let me handle all legal communication." I met her eyes. There was a rare kind of understanding there. I knew it wasn't just professional advice, it was a reminder from one woman to another who'd been underestimated. By the time I left, the sun was overhead. The breeze carried the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe. I stood at the door for a beat and looked up at the pale blue sky. Something in my chest felt lighter, as if half the weight had been lifted. On the way home, I stopped at a small gas station. While the tank filled, I caught my reflection in the mirror, a silver-haired woman with deep lines around her eyes but a gaze clearer than ever. I realized I was getting myself back. I drove slowly through the suburbs, under rows of oak trees. Each house I passed reminded me of little families, dinner laughter, baking smells. My house, the one I used to call a nest, now felt like a quiet battlefield. But this time, I wouldn't walk in like someone being pushed out. I'd walk in as the rightful owner. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Crystal through the window on the phone, her face tight in the sunlight. I couldn't hear her, but from her lips I could guess the familiar words, "Sell the house." I walked in calmly and gave a short greeting. "Good afternoon." She turned, forced a smile. "Where were you?" "I thought you had a morning shift." "I took the day," I said evenly. "Had a few things to handle." She watched me, suspicion flickering. I only smiled and went straight upstairs. In my room, I opened my notebook to a new page. The first line I wrote, "Justice begins with a single word, courage." I sat there for a long time, looking at my handwriting. Outside, traffic hummed far off, but inside, everything was peaceful. It had been a long time since I felt this, not the peace of resignation, but the peace of someone preparing a counterstrike. I sent Nora a short text. "Nora, if anything happens, you're the second keeper of the files, okay?" She replied almost instantly, "Count on it. I'm here, Marion." I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair. The scent of coffee lingered on my coat, reminding me of the morning at Avery's where for the first time in months I felt heard. By late afternoon, the sunset washed the window rose gold. I stepped onto the porch and sat in my husband's old rocker. In the quiet air, I heard wind in the leaves and kids playing ball next door. I sipped tea, warmth spreading slowly through me. Tomorrow, Avery would start drafting the eviction notice. I knew the road wouldn't be easy, but at least I'd taken the first steps on my own feet. No more crying in silence. No more waiting for rescue. I smiled, the first true smile in weeks of humiliation, because I finally understood something simple that took a lifetime to learn. No one protects me better than I do. That evening, rain came out of nowhere. First storm of May speckling the yard, streetlights shimmering on wet concrete. I was about to make tea when I heard a car at the gate. A shiny black SUV stopped at the curb. The doors opened, and I saw Crystal's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hansen, step out, dignified, dressed like they were heading to a board meeting. Crystal followed, arm draped loosely around Tyler's shoulder, voice sweet as syrup. "Mom, my parents want to stop by for a quick talk tonight." I checked the clock, 7:48 p.m. No appointment, no heads up. I only nodded slightly. "All right," I said. "Come in." Mrs. Hansen smiled politely, eyes sweeping the living room like she was inspecting a property to purchase. Mr. Hansen, tall, silver hair cut neat, sat down and spoke right away. "Marion, we're not here to judge. We're here to talk like adults." I poured tea and handed cups around. "I also prefer straightforward conversations," I said evenly. Crystal sat close to Tyler, fingers interlaced, eyes glinting with calculation. I knew she'd prepped a script. "Marion, Mrs. Hansen began, "we know living with young people can be hard, especially across generations. But maybe you should consider a more comfortable option." She paused for a sip, then smiled. "A high-end assisted living community. Nurses, doctors, attentive caregivers. Very good for seniors' health." I kept quiet, looking at each of them. "What about this house?" I asked slowly. Crystal jumped in, like she'd been waiting. "Tyler and I will stay. We can manage it, maintenance, upkeep, keeping things tidy. You won't have to worry about anything, just rest." "Who pays for maintenance, taxes, insurance?" I asked softly, almost a whisper. No one answered. Tyler's eyes slid straight to Crystal. Mrs. Hansen dabbed her forehead with a tissue. Mr. Hansen gave a polite little cough. "Let the kids handle that," Crystal cut in. "You know those costs aren't much. What matters is your peace and having care." I smiled lightly. "Peace?" I repeated. "Yes, I like peace too." I stood to refill the teapot. As I did, I subtly pressed the record button on my smartwatch, the one I wear on shifts. I kept my voice even, deliberately clearer. "So, what you're suggesting is that I move out of this house into assisted living, and you two stay to manage it? Did I hear that right?" The room stalled a beat. Crystal pressed her lips together. "Mrs." Hansen tilted her head, voice sweet as sugar with poison under it. "Marion, no one's forcing you. We only want what's best. At your age, taking care of yourself is the priority." That line kept ringing in my head, colder than the rain outside. Have you ever heard someone say, "It's for your own good," when what they really wanted was something that belongs to you? Share how that felt in the comments. I truly want to know what you think when you hear those words. I nodded, poured everyone more tea, and said slowly, "Thank you. I'll consider it." Those 3 words softened the room. Crystal looked relieved, like she thought I was giving in. Tyler stayed silent, wringing his hands. Each time he seemed about to speak, he stopped every time I looked at him. His eyes dropped. "Mister." Hanson braced his hands on his knees, keeping it courteous. "You know, my daughter only wants to help. She worries you're lonely and tired. Assisted living is modern now. There's a pool, gardens. You'll like it." I smiled. "I'm sure. But the question is, who truly cares about my health?" No one answered. Only the wall clock ticked through the thick air. I looked at each face and saw the cracks forming in their patience. Finally, I stood and set the teapot down gently. "It's late. Thank you for coming by. I'll think about your suggestion." They stood, gathered their bags, still speaking politely. But when Crystal reached the door, I saw her eyes cold, sharp like someone who just placed a chess piece perfectly. When the door closed, the house fell quiet. Only the rain on the porch faded. I walked into the kitchen and looked around. The red labels still clung to pan lids, spice jars, the coffee machine. I stood still for a moment, then raised my hand and peeled them off. 1, 2, 3. Paper tore softly in the hush. I took them all fridge to shelves, erasing every trace of that soft takeover they'd staged. When I pulled the last one from the stainless soup pot, a strange feeling spread through my chest. Not anger, not joy, a return taking back what was already mine. I scooped the labels into a small trash bag, tied it tight, and tossed it out. The rain was still light, the wind cool, but a small, steady flame burned inside me. Back at the table, I picked up my phone. Avery had texted, "Notary has an opening Saturday morning, 10 a.m. I reserved it if you agree." I replied, "I'll be there." And I recorded tonight's conversation. Seconds later, Avery wrote, "Good, don't delete anything. The more they talk, the better for us." I put the phone away and looked around the kitchen again. No more red labels. No more Crystal, do not touch. Everything looked the same, clean, quiet, but felt completely different, reclaimed. The stove clock flicked to 11:59 p.m. The house slept. I walked to the new fridge, the one Crystal called hers, and set my hand on the gleaming door. I opened it, checked each shelf, then turned the tiny key hidden in my sleeve and locked it. The dry little click was soft but enough to make me smile. The closed door reflected me back, a woman once humiliated in her own kitchen, now standing straight, calm, with the key in her hand. I took my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. "They want to talk like adults. Fine. From now on, I'll act like an adult who knows the law, knows boundaries, and knows when to lock the door." I set the pen down and listened to the wind at the window. Down the hall, Tyler shifted in his sleep, and Crystal was probably dreaming of a luxury condo that doesn't exist. They didn't know the game had changed sides. And tonight, the person truly in control was me. I turned off the kitchen light and walked slowly to my room. The rain kept falling, even and gentle. In the dark, I felt the quiet of a first small victory, not over them, but over my own fear. Saturday morning, I'll meet the notary and begin the legal leg of this journey. Tonight, I'll allow myself one luxury I haven't dared in a long time, a good night's sleep. 3 days after the family meeting, Nora called me. Her voice was a mix of urgency and firmness. "Marion, I spoke with a friend, a forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS. Send him the account screenshots you copied from Tyler's computer. He'll review them carefully and keep you anonymous." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep this at a civil level. But the other part, the one that had watched my son change and been humiliated in my own kitchen, knew it was time to learn the truth, however dirty. I sent the files through the secure email Avery set up. 3 days later, the report came back. I opened it and read slowly, line by line. In Tyler's transactions, there were repeating deposits from a source called Sable Consulting Agency, exactly 14 days apart, each for $2,800. The accountant wrote briefly, "This agency does not exist in the tax database, likely a shell entity issuing fake invoices for money laundering or tax evasion. If audited, the recipient is directly liable." I sat still. The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy with my son's guilt. I read it again, hoping my eyes were wrong, but no, the numbers were real, cold, and unforgivable. I leaned back, hands over my face, anger and pity tangled in my throat. I'd sacrificed my life so Tyler wouldn't grow up in scarcity, and now he'd stepped into a dangerous gray zone for ambition. I called Avery. She picked up right away, calm. "Mrs. Blake, I've reviewed the report Nora sent. If accurate, Tyler could be implicated in tax fraud. Penalties can be severe, even criminal if the IRS opens a case." I swallowed. "I don't want my son to go to prison." Avery paused for a few seconds, then spoke gently. "I understand. We won't use this to harm, but to persuade. This will be our strategic lever to show them that if they insist, they risk not only the house, but their freedom." I stayed silent. It took me nearly a full minute. Before I could answer, "Okay, do it your way." That night, I spread every document across the table. Photos, receipts, messages, a copy of the loan agreement, the financial report. Each sheet was a small shard of truth fit together. They formed a picture of greed. I opened my notebook and marked the timeline. February, they started sticking labels, "Crystal, do not touch." March, the food I bought was thrown out. April, Crystal told Tyler to let Mom feel cramped so she'll transfer. May, the Hansen family came to push me into assisted living. Now, the discovery of illegal money flows. I named this file set the Truth Dossier. Dry title maybe, but to me it was an oath. I printed 3 sets, one for me, one for Avery, one for Nora. Each packet was clipped with the list of audio files, photos, and receipts. When the printer stopped, I slipped each set into a plastic folder, labeled by hand, my hands barely trembling, and steadying as I went. Paper wasn't just evidence, it was the line between me and injustice. Night fell, and the house was so quiet I could hear wind seeping through the door jamb. I sat in the living room. The warm lamp threw my shadow long across the wall. Suddenly, an argument erupted upstairs. Crystal's voice was sharp and high. "Don't you get it? I can't live like this forever. If this doesn't get done, I'm gone, Tyler." Tyler sounded worn out, almost pleading. "Crystal, keep it down. Mom can hear us." "So what if she hears? She'll be out of here soon. I'm not waiting." I sat still, listening, my hand resting on my teacup. Every word thudded down to the first floor, one blow after another, but I didn't feel a stab anymore. Just a quiet, clean hurt like a wound that's closed. I remembered when Tyler was little how he'd cling to my legs, begging, "Mom, when I grow up, you'll never have to work again. I'll take care of you." And now he was discussing how to push me out. Life can be cruel enough that your own love becomes a weapon against you. I sighed, stood, and set the cup on the table. No tears, no resentment. Only cold clarity, like a doctor reading a late-stage cancer report. Not curable, only removable. I walked to my office, turned on the computer, and opened the folder titled Notice Day. Avery had already sent the forms for signature, notice to vacate, and demand for repayment. I read every line carefully, checking each clause. Occupant is present without a rental agreement. Owner may demand vacation of the premises within 30 days. Unpaid debts will be escalated to legal proceedings. I signed at the bottom, saved, and printed hard copies. Each time the pen touched paper, it felt like I was closing a long chapter 1 of endurance. When I finished, I folded the documents into an envelope and sealed it. On the front, in clean handwriting, I wrote, "To Avery Chen, attorney at law." I slipped the envelope into my purse along with the copy for Nora. The clock on the wall read 11:48 p.m. I looked up and heard the rain on the porch taper off. The whole city felt hushed. Streetlight glow pooling soft and yellow under the eaves. I checked the kitchen windows, locked the fridge, then stopped and looked around one more time. Everything neat and calm, but I knew it was only the quiet before the storm. Back in my room, I sat on the bed, phone in hand. Nora had texted, "The accountant confirms, if the IRS audits, Tyler could face back taxes and up to triple penalties. But if he stops now, he might avoid the worst." I finished reading and took a deep breath. Not joy, not pain, just regret. I never wanted my child punished. I just wanted him to wake up before it was too late. I set the phone down, opened my small notebook and wrote, "Love isn't the same as blindness. Some children can only be saved by letting them fall." Then I closed the notebook and set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. Tomorrow, notice day. I turned off the light, lay back, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. The clock ticked steadily. With each beat, my fear receded, making room for something else, the cool calm of someone ready. They used to think I was a soft, elderly woman. They don't know that when a mother stops crying, what comes next is action. I closed my eyes. A quiet sleep settled over me, light as mist. Tomorrow, when the alarm rings, I'll rise not with a broken heart, but with one that knows how it will live and who deserves to remain in this home. That morning, the sky was unusually clear. Early sun washed the oak trees out front. A breeze stirred little white blooms along the walk. I'd been up early, brewed a pot of ginger tea, and set it on the kitchen table. The house was so quiet I could hear the living room clock steady as my own heartbeat. At 9:30 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Avery in a gray blazer, files in hand, with a process server beside her. He nodded politely. "Mrs. Marion Blake? We're here to serve legal notice." I drew a slow breath and kept my voice even. "Come in." "I'm ready." As they stepped inside, Crystal appeared on the stairs in a blush silk robe, hair loosely pinned, lotion still on her face. Her eyes flickered at the sight of the two strangers. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound in control. Tyler came behind her in sweats, face drawn, like he hadn't slept. He looked at me, then Avery, confused like someone waking from a bad dream. I seated everyone around the table. Avery opened her case and set down a thick stack of papers, while the process server stood by, clear and firm. At the request of the property owner, Mrs. Marion Blake, I'm here to deliver a notice to vacate. Timeline, 72 hours from this moment. Additionally, this is a demand to repay the $35,000 plus interest, with a claim for emotional distress and property damage. The kitchen froze. Morning light washed across the table and straight into Crystal's widened eyes. She shot to her feet, voice shrill. "What? Betrayal? You're suing us? Did you forget who's been taking care of you all these years?" I met her gaze, steady. "No one has taken care of me, Crystal. I gave you a place to live, food, and chances. All three end today." Tyler dropped to his knees, hands braced on his thighs. His voice was hoarse and shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. Don't do this. I didn't mean. I just wanted you to rest." I looked at my son, the man I once carried when he was sick, the knees I bandaged when he fell off his bike. Now he knelt before me not out of love but fear of losing a crutch. "Tyler," I said, light but precise, "you've had thousands of chances to tell the truth, to change, to start over. You chose to ignore them all. Don't apologize to me, apologize to yourself." He bowed his head. Tears hit the tile. Crystal slammed her hand on the table. "Enough! She's bluffing. No court lets you throw family out like this. Avery stood, voice cool and cutting. Under Texas law, a person staying without a lease can be required to vacate within 72 hours if properly noticed. All documents here are notarized, with copies filed at the court. If you or your husband wish to contest this, we'll see you at the Bexar County hearing. Crystal went pale and stepped back. You'll regret doing this to your own son, she hissed. I stood, answering calmly. I've regretted enough, mostly that I didn't do it sooner. 15 minutes later, when Avery and the process server left, the house felt thick with silence. No one spoke. I stood by the counter holding a cold cup of tea and watched Crystal gather her phone, wallet, and any small thing she claimed was hers. Tyler came down the stairs, dazed. Mom, at least give me some time. Cut in. You have 72 hours. And if you're truly sorry, you'll use those 72 hours to sort out your life, not to beg me to withdraw the filing. The front door opened, and, unexpectedly, Crystal's parents walked in. Same polished look, same superior tone. Mr. Hansen spoke first, no greeting. Marion, what is this? Our daughter says you're threatening to throw them out. This is an abuse of power. Mrs. Hansen piled on, voice sharp. Shameful. At your age, dragging a lawyer in just to humiliate your own family. Before I could answer, Avery, who'd just turned out of the driveway, heard the commotion and came back. She stepped inside with a spare copy of the file. Her tone was calm, final. Mr. and Mrs. Hansen, I represent Mrs. Blake. If you intend to countersue, we'll see you in Bexar County Court. For now, please leave the premises. Only the lawful owner decides who may stay. Silence dropped. Mr. Hansen grabbed his wife's hand and pulled her toward the door, face flushed with anger. Crystal rushed after them, crying and saying something I couldn't make out. Tyler remained, staring at me, desperation and shame mixed in his eyes. I said nothing. I turned and walked upstairs. Each step was heavy, but strangely, not shaky. In my room, I shut the door and leaned against the wall. Below me, the noise continued, Crystal crying, Tyler soothing, suitcases thumping, car doors slamming. I closed my eyes and listened like someone replaying the film of her life and knowing the last scene was near. A moment later, quiet settled. Only the first light taps of rain on the window, like the sky wanted to wash the last dirty weeks away. I went back to the kitchen. It was neat. Empty. On the fridge door, one red label remained, Crystal, do not touch, faded, a corner curling. I stared at it for a long time. Then I reached up and peeled it off. The paper tore halfway and clung to my fingertip like it wanted to hold on to. One last shred of ownership. I crumpled it and dropped it in the trash. That was the final label. I opened the fridge. Inside were just some greens, a few water bottles, and a new carton of milk. I poured a glass, added a splash of ginger tea, and inhaled. The scent was warm and soft, nothing like the icy morning weeks ago when I'd been blocked with, "Don't open the wrong one, this fridge is mine." Now, it was mine again, as it always should have been. I sat down, hands around the cup. No more trembling, no more weight, no more bitterness. Only the full quiet of someone who reclaimed what was hers without raising her voice. Before heading upstairs, I wrote a few lines. Notice day 9:30 a.m. They left in tears. I stayed, steady. No one won, only justice was put back where it belongs. I set the pen down and looked around the house. My husband's photo still hung on the wall. The window was open a crack to let the breeze in. I spoke softly, as if to him. I did it, Frank. Finally, this house is ours again, peaceful, clean, and free. And on the windless noon of notice day, I sat there, sipped ginger tea, listened to the rain on the porch, and knew without doubt the new chapter of my life had begun. Sunday morning, the sky was a dull gray, clouds heavy like a storm warning. I brewed mint tea and set it on the dining table, ready for what I knew would come. At exactly 10 a.m., an engine rumbled at the gate. Through the window, the familiar SUV slid up the drive. 3 figures stepped out first: Crystal in a crisp white dress, her parents behind her, and lastly, Tyler, hands shoved in his pockets, head down. The family committee, I thought, a brief smile tugging at my mouth. I opened the door. Crystal walked straight in without waiting to be asked. "We need to talk," she said, voice firm, like she'd rehearsed this. "All right," I answered lightly. "I have a few things to present, too." I led them to the expeding kitchen. Everything was laid out, a clean table with a thick file sorted by sections, each clearly numbered. On the laptop screen, Avery waited on a video call, serious, steady. Crystal took a seat with her arms crossed. Her parents flanked her like a petty tribunal. Tyler sat apart, gaze unfocused. I opened the file and spoke evenly. "First, thank you for coming. I don't intend to destroy anyone. I only want to clarify the truth, what's happened in this house." I turned the first page, the household cost sheet. For 3 months, all electricity, water, internet, and property tax came out of my personal account, I said, placing the bills in front of them. "Meanwhile, you two," I looked at Crystal and Tyler, "contributed not a single dollar, despite promising to split costs." Crystal smirked. "We were going to pay, just hadn't gotten to it." I smiled back. 3 months, Crystal. I worked in the ICU. I know exactly what not yet means. 3 months is long enough for a patient to heal or for a lie to unravel. I opened the second section, the $35,000 loan agreement, signed by Tyler. "This is the money my son borrowed 2 years ago to open a garage. No payments, no interest, not even an apology." Tyler closed his eyes. I heard a hard breath leave him. Next section, the messages and the luxury condo flyer. The line circled, "Deposit once Mom's house is sold." "And this," I said, voice still even, "is proof you two plotted to sell my property while I'm alive." Mrs. Hanson shot to her feet, voice shrill. "Marion, how dare you invade my daughter's privacy? This is a family matter." Avery spoke immediately from the screen, voice like a clean blade. "Ma'am, when someone plans to sell another person's property, it isn't private, it's civil fraud. If reported, authorities can initiate a financial investigation." Mr. Hanson frowned, ready to push back, but Avery continued, calm as if reading statute. "And if we submit evidence of deposits from Sable Consulting Agency, the IRS can get involved. Then every undeclared dollar, every fake invoice, everything gets audited." The room froze. Crystal turned to Tyler and whispered, "How did she find out about that?" Tyler said nothing. Fear filled his eyes. I spoke low and steady. "Tyler, I don't want you in prison, but I won't cover for you anymore. You've gone too far, and if you don't stop, the person who saves you this time won't be me." Tyler dropped his head. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong." His voice shook, a lost child's. Crystal scraped her chair back, the legs screeching across the floor. "Enough. She just wants to humiliate us. All her life she's controlled everything. Now she's using the law to win. You call that fair?" I looked at her, cold. "It's not the law that helps me win. It's the truth that keeps me standing." Crystal barked a hard laugh. "Truth? You're a bossy old woman playing victim." I simply said, softly, "You can say anything you like, but by Tuesday, 5 p.m., this house must be empty." The sentence landed like a judge's gavel. Tyler broke down and Crystal slammed her palm on the table, flinging her wedding ring metal clinking hard on wood. "I'm not staying here another minute." Her parents stood, voices sharp. "We won't let this go. You think people will believe a tyrant old lady over our daughter? We'll take this to social media and show everyone your true face." I didn't answer. I slid my smartwatch from my pocket, tapped a small button. The red light blinked. I said slowly, This conversation is being recorded. Please continue if you'd like more evidence. The room dropped into absolute silence. Mr. Hanson, flustered, tugged his wife toward the door. Crystal glanced around, eyes darting. Tyler stayed in his chair, shoulders shaking. I looked at my son and spoke softly. Tyler, you can go with them, or you can stay, but only if you take responsibility. I'm not covering for anyone anymore. He lifted his head, eyes wet, voice tight. I don't deserve it, but I want to make it right. I nodded without adding more. I know real remorse isn't in promises, it's in what you do after you've lost everything. Avery spoke from the screen, closing out the family meeting. Reminder, you have 72 hours left to vacate the house. After that, the legal filings go to the court. Crystal stood, wiped her tears, but her voice stayed venomous. Just wait. You'll die regretting it in this empty house. I only smiled, light as a breath. No, Crystal, this house was never empty. It was just missing honesty. When the door slammed, an engine roared to life out on the street. I stood still for a few seconds, then exhaled slowly. The air in the house felt lighter, as if even the wind knew who had just left. I turned to the dining table, where the wedding ring Crystal had thrown still lay, catching a weak glint of light. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it, the last symbol of a marriage built on lies. Avery was still on the screen, a small smile on her face. You okay? I'm okay, I answered, my voice low but firm. I haven't felt this calm in a long time. Good work, Marion, Avery said. I'll keep monitoring, and remember, keep the doors locked. Don't forget Tuesday, 5 p.m. I won't forget, I said. I shut the laptop, slid the file into a drawer, and sat at the table. A breeze drifted through the doorway, carrying damp earth and a hint of mint tea. I picked up my phone and texted Avery a short line. Please leave Tyler a way out if he takes responsibility. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the sky was still overcast, but something inside me felt bright in a strange way, not the light of winning, but the light of final peace. The storm was passing, and for the first time in years, I could hear the wind moving through my house, soft, so soft, like a new breath. That night, as the window frame trembled with the breeze, I heard a car roll to a stop in the drive. I peeked through the curtain. Tyler, alone, shirt wrinkled, hair messy, eyes red. He stood at the door for a long time, hand on a small duffel, like he wasn't sure whether to knock or turn away. I opened the door before he could lift his hand. I came to apologize, he said, voice hoarse and dry, like someone who hasn't spoken in days. I stood still. The night was so quiet I could hear the insects in the yard. Where's Crystal? I asked. He looked down. She left, took my savings, left a few ugly words. He held out his phone. On the screen was Crystal's message before she vanished. I'm not living with a coward who kneels to his mommy. Stay there and suck up that old air. I glanced and pushed the phone back. Don't show me anything that makes your heart heavier. Tyler sniffed, trying to swallow a sob. I've got nothing left, Mom. But I want to start over. I know I was wrong. I need you to give me 7 days. Just 7 days to clear my head, find a job, quit drinking, then I'll go. I'll pay room money, pay back every dollar. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to fix it. I looked at my son, the man I once carried through fevers, standing in front of me like a lost boy. In the warm porch light, I saw his hands shaking. Part fear, part alcohol withdrawal. Come in, I said slowly. But this time, I have 4 conditions. He raised his eyes, hope and fear mixed together. I brought him to the kitchen and poured us both ginger tea. First, I said, for 7 days here, not a single drop of alcohol. If you crave it, call me, or step into the yard for air, but don't hide. Second, You will send out resumes and look for work. Every expense, phone, gas, meals, you cover yourself. I won't stop you, but I won't pay. Third, you must contact a treatment center or a recovery group at least one session. Fourth, I held his gaze. Each night, you write down 3 things you did right that day. You don't have to show me. Just be honest with yourself. Tyler nodded, eyes red. I promise. I took a blank sheet and wrote the 4 conditions, then signed at the bottom. If you truly want to start over, sign it. This isn't a mom and son deal, it's an agreement between 2 adults. He signed with a shaky hand. When he set the pen down, tears fell on the paper's edge, blurring a small patch. I folded it and slipped it into a file, like laying a new foundation after a storm has torn the house apart. The next morning I was up early and found Tyler sitting on the porch, staring at the pale gray sky with a cup of black coffee in front of him. No smell of booze, just coffee and mist. "Did you send out resumes?" I asked. "I did. 2 places at building supply stores, 1 at an auto shop. They said they'll take a look." I nodded, no praise, no scolding. I set a sandwich and a glass of water on the table, breakfast for someone trying to fix himself. That evening he came home late. I heard dishes being washed, running water, light clinks, patient and quiet. I stepped into the doorway, about to speak, then didn't. I just asked, "What did you do right today?" He met my eyes and smiled a little. "I didn't drink." "That's enough," I said, smiling back. Day 2 passed gently. I worked in the yard and Tyler cleaned out the garage where beer cans and dried paint once piled up. He bagged trash, scrubbed the floor, hung my late husband's old tools, lining each one neatly. In the afternoon, Mrs. Gutierrez from next door brought over a warm apple loaf. "I hear your boy is back," she said, setting it on the counter. "Good for you. Sometimes the crack is where the light gets in." I poured tea and we sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the oaks. She told me, "My son was an addict too, Marion. I once thought he was lost for good, but 4 years now sober, back at work helping others. I know you're feeling afraid to hope because you've been disappointed too much." I looked at Tyler in the backyard, bent over picking up trash, tall, alone. I don't know how far he'll go, but for the first time in months, he's quiet, and the quiet isn't hostile anymore. Mrs. Gutierrez smiled softly. Silence is the first sound of change. On the 3rd night, under the warm yellow lights, I opened Frank's keepsake box. A photo of him grinning with a saw, a stopped old watch, a few letters he wrote me when we were young. In one letter, the line he used to say, "Discipline is love in its hard form. The one who teaches a child with discipline loves that child the most." My fingers trembled. Now I understood. Some love doesn't arrive as a hug, it arrives as a boundary, as the courage to say no at the right time. I folded the letter back into the box. No tears, just warmth, like Frank standing somewhere nearby, smiling. On the 4th morning, I woke to sounds in the kitchen. Tyler was cooking eggs, wearing an old apron, face clearer than I'd seen in a long time. "You're up?" he said, sounding relieved. "I've got good news." I sat, poured tea. "What is it?" "The building supply store by the gas station called. They want to interview me this afternoon, maybe start me on a trial shift. They need someone who can fix tools and organize the warehouse. I've done it before, so they're giving me a shot." I looked at him, said nothing at first. Then I nodded and smiled. "Good. That means you can start over." Tyler's eyes brightened, lips trembling like he was trying to hold on to belief. "I know, and I won't let you down again." I stood and set my hand on his shoulder, the hand that once shook with anger now felt light. "Don't promise. Just live each day the way you wrote in that agreement. When you keep your word to yourself, you won't have to fear letting anyone down." He nodded, eyes shining. In the afternoon, as he left, I watched from the window. A breeze carried the smell of coffee from the corner shop. Sunlight slanted gold across the yard. I sat in Frank's old rocker and opened my small notebook. In the bottom corner of the last page I wrote, "When someone breaks, don't rush to bury them. They might be learning how to mend." I closed the notebook and looked toward the road, where Tyler walked with his back straight, job papers in hand. For the first time in months, his stride didn't look heavy. It looked like a man beginning again for real. Inside me, no tears, just a gentle, spreading warmth. Hope. That morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and laid a soft gold across the floor. I was making coffee when a motorcycle buzzed and cut off in the drive. Tyler came in with dust on his shirt, a little sun-browned, but his eyes were clear, the light I hadn't seen in years. "I got the job, Mom," he said, breathless and grinning. "The building supply store hired me full-time. Starting pay isn't much, but enough for a small room near work. I think it's time I stand on my own." I set my cup down, stunned for a few seconds. "Really? Really?" He nodded, handing me the new contract. Cheap paper, but I looked at it like a diploma from life. Tyler pulled a worn brown envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. "I know I owe you too much, but I want to start paying you back, even if it's small." I opened it. $500, 5 crisp bills laid flat. "100 is room money for these past days," he said, "and 400 is the first repayment. And—" he pulled out a folded sheet, hands shaking as he handed it to me. "This is the repayment plan," I wrote. $400 a month, increasing as I get raises. You can check anytime." I held the paper and read each clumsy, crooked line, careful and sincere. At the bottom, under Repayment Plan, Tyler had signed, "Your son, Tyler Blake." I looked up at him. In an instant, every image returned. The blonde little boy with a toy truck. The teenager who'd promised, "I'll take care of you." The grown man who had kneeled in tears. All of them blending into one this time, standing on his own 2 feet. I set the envelope down, stepped forward, and hugged him. He went still, then hugged back, his hands shaking not from fear, but relief. I whispered, barely loud enough for us both, "You don't have to pay it all back, Tyler. Just don't repeat it." He gave a small smile and nodded, voice rough. "I get it. But you always said grown-ups take responsibility. I'm learning to be a grown-up now." That night we cooked our first dinner together, and maybe the last under the same roof, in the true sense. I made rice. Tyler marinated chicken, the same honey-grilled chicken he loved as a boy, only now my hands are more lined and his are calloused. The smell of roasting chicken filled the kitchen, blending with the simmering pot, the chop of the knife, and the light laughter of 2 people learning to begin again. I realized that after everything, motherhood hadn't vanished. It had just needed to be cleaned of anger and fear. Over dinner, Tyler talked about the new job, organizing materials, checking orders, sometimes lifting loads. "Not as exhausting as lying every day," he said with a smile between bites. I stayed quiet, watched him eat with a steady appetite, and felt something strange rise up. Pride, sadness, and peace together. "You know," I said, "the day you were born, I thought my job was to keep you safe forever. Turns out parenting is learning to let go without letting go." Tyler looked up, eyes serious and gentle. "I think you did both, Mom." Monday morning, the air was clear after a light night rain. Tyler's friend's pickup eased into the drive. His buddy Nate, tall, lean, kind face, hopped out to help load a few small boxes. Everything Tyler owned fit into 4 boxes: clothes, some tools, an old photo of me and Frank, and the watch I gave him at 18. Watching it, I felt both ache and ease. Neighbors gathered along the porch. Mrs. Gutierrez came over with a coffee. "Moving day?" she asked. "Yep." I smiled. "He found a room near work." She watched Tyler hoist a box into the truck and nodded. "Told you. A good son comes back, but next time, he'll return as a man." I smiled, eyes stinging a little. I hope so. She patted my shoulder. No need to hope, I can see it. The way he walks today, it's not running away, it's leaving the nest. I turned to my son. Tyler stood by the tailgate, said something to Nate, then waved back. I'll call every week, he said. And I'll send the money on time. Eat a real breakfast. Mom don't just drink coffee, I joked back. And you do your laundry. There's no invisible mother at that room. We both laughed. It drifted light on the breeze, no resentment, no guilt. As the truck rolled away, I stood watching for a long time. No tears, just a gentle, warm space like the breath you release after a storm. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The house was still, but not lonely. Everything as it should be. Tidy kitchen, shining table, the scent of grilled chicken still hanging faintly. I brewed a small pot of tea, poured it into a porcelain cup, and sat by the window. On the table lay Tyler's handwritten repayment plan. I read it again and paused at the last line. I can't pay back everything I took, but I will repay with time by living right. I smiled softly, brushing a finger over his messy signature. Maybe, sometimes, growing up isn't a fancy apology. It's a smudged sheet of paper and a small envelope of honest effort. Near dusk, I watered the flowers on the porch. The last light turned the yard honey gold. A mild breeze, damp earth, and roses in the air. Traffic hummed far off, and my heart felt as calm as a still lake. Mrs. Gutierrez came by again with a basket. "For you," she said. "Banana bread I just baked, best eaten when your mind has finally settled." I took it, smiling. "You always know exactly when I need something." She sat beside me, looking at the quiet porch. Strange, isn't it? When the kids leave, the house is emptier, but the heart is lighter. I nodded, sipped tea. Because we know this time they're leaving not to run, but to find their way. She looked at me kindly. "You did the right thing not rescuing, but teaching him to rescue himself." I chuckled softly and looked up at the peach-colored sky. Frank would be proud. I finally learned to love the way he taught disciplined, but kind. When the sun slipped away, I latched the gate and went inside. Warm air, golden light. I went upstairs, changed into pajamas, and pulled the curtains. On the table, the family photo still stood: Frank, me, and Tyler at his 10th birthday, grinning over the cake. I traced the glass and whispered, "I kept the promise, Frank. Our boy is standing on his own again." I turned off the light and lay down. No doors slamming, no heavy footsteps, no sighs through the wall, just the wind threading the roofline, as steady as breath. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through. No dreams, no jolts awake. Just the rare peace of a mother who finally learned that letting go doesn't mean losing your child, it means giving him the chance to find himself. 6 months have passed since Tyler left the nest. The house that once echoed with fights now holds only the tick of the clock and the light drift of coffee each morning. I slowed down and did the things I'd put off from exhaustion, changed the curtains, repainted the kitchen, planted a row of white roses along the porch. When the wind blows, the petals flutter as if someone is whispering, "It's okay now, Marion, it's okay." In the mornings, I usually head out to the garden early, trim the dead stems, spread fresh compost, and water with the old can Frank used. Sometimes, when the sun hits the spout just right, the light refracts into a tiny rainbow. I look at it and feel weightless, a piece I hadn't touched in years. Every Sunday, Tyler comes by, right on time, like clockwork. He drives a small pickup, stops at the gate, and taps the horn twice, our little signal. Each time, I open the door, already catching the smell of fresh bread from down the street. "I brought bread from the shop near my place," he says, lifting a still warm paper bag. "Baked this morning. Which kind do you want, Mom?" "Any kind you pick," I answer. And he always smiles. Tyler has changed a lot. Not just in how he looks neater, healthier, but in how he talks, how he sees people. His eyes don't dodge or shrink anymore. He's become a man who knows when to feel ashamed and when to feel proud. Each month, Tyler sends $400 to $500 steady with a short text. Picked up some extra shifts this month, sending $500. He also includes a photo of his pay stub, not to show off, but to prove to himself he's keeping his word. I never demand anything. I just save those messages, month by month, like a ledger of my son's growing up. One fall afternoon, Tyler showed up with someone. A young woman with brown hair tied back, a beige sweater, and a gentle smile. "Mom," Tyler said, "this is Lena Brooks. She works at the bakery near me. She knows I owe you a lot, and she wanted to thank the person who taught me how to grow up." Lena offered her hand, her voice soft. "I've heard a lot about you." From Tyler. "I just want to say, without you, I don't think he'd be standing here." I looked at her, no heavy makeup, clear eyes. Something about her made me trust her immediately. Not because she's pretty, but because her gaze looked exactly like mine at 20, when I still believed kindness never goes out of style. Dinner that day felt unusually warm. Lena helped set the table. Tyler did the dishes. When he finished, he whispered, "She's nothing like Crystal, right, Mom?" I smiled. "Don't compare. Just remember, someone who truly loves you won't ask you to tear your mother down to prove anything." He nodded, eyes deep and steady. A week later, I got a text from Crystal. I was wrong. "I want to talk. Will Tyler forgive me?" I read it and didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore. There was nothing left to say. I just took a screenshot and sent it to Tyler, no comment. An hour later, my son wrote back. I said thank you, but no. "Thanks for staying silent, Mom." I cried when I read that. Not out of spite, but because someone who once knelt in weakness could now stand tall without me holding him up. At the end of the month, I went to attorney Avery Chen's office to update my will. Avery smiled when she saw me. "You look different than 6 months ago." "Maybe because I've learned what's worth keeping," I said. I asked to add a clause. Establish the Frank Blake Nursing Scholarship Fund for nursing students in hardship. Avery asked, "Are you sure?" "You could leave that money to Tyler." I smiled. "I don't need to leave him assets. I want to leave him a legacy he can be proud of. If Tyler lives right, that's the most valuable inheritance." Avery nodded, her eyes shining. "Frank is smiling somewhere, I'm sure." A few weeks later, my coworker friend Nora Patel invited me to join a support group for parents who'd been taken advantage of by their kids. I hesitated. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But Nora said, "Not to complain, Marion, to show people still stuck in it that they're not alone." So I went. Small room, about 10 people every age. Some had their homes taken over, some had been drained to nothing. When it was my turn, I kept it short. My son once slapped labels on the fridge and tried to push me out of my own house. Today, that same son calls me Mom with a voice of a man who understands gratitude. The room went quiet, then filled with gentle applause. I didn't cry, but my heart warmed. For the first time, I told my story without shame, only freedom. One December evening, Texas went dark with a sudden outage. The whole block lost power. I dug up a few old candles and lit the kitchen. The flames danced on the walls, lighting up every corner cracks I'd patched, things I once feared to look at. I sat down, poured tea, and let the candlelight fall across Frank's photo. The house was so quiet I could hear the rain tapping the roof. In that moment I realized I'd gotten it all back, not the things, but my peace and my self-respect. I picked up my phone and texted Avery, "Thank you. Because of you, the door to life stayed open for both me and my son. That door doesn't just lead out, it leads back to our own hearts." Avery replied right away, "I only helped a little. You're the one who opened it, Marion." I set the phone down and smiled in the candlelight. The next morning, with sunlight cutting through the window, I got up early to prep Sunday lunch. In the pot was gumbo, Tyler's childhood favorite. I cooked slowly, stirred steadily, listening to the soft bubble while the radio played Frank's old jazz. I looked around the freshly painted kitchen, the clean curtains, the roses blooming on the porch. No more red labels on the fridge, no more orders barked at me, no more fear in my own home, just me and what I choose to keep: memory, kindness, and freedom. When the clock struck 11, I heard a car at the gate. Tyler right on time, as always. I wiped my hands and opened the door. My son stepped in, bringing the smell of wind and a warm smile. "Gumbo?" I could smell it from the corner. He grinned. I laughed. "Yep, where's the bread you promised?" He raised the bag. "Right here, your favorite." We set the table together. I looked at my son, calm eyes, straight shoulders, a real smile. 6 months ago, I thought I'd lost him for good. Now I had my son back and a friend, a man who knows gratitude and how to love the right way. As I sat down, I said quietly to myself, "Frank, you see it, right? The house is peaceful again. Both of us made it back from the old ashes." I ladled Tyler the first bowl of gumbo, steam curling up in rich ribbons. Outside, the sun lit the white roses along the porch, round blooms, pure and fragrant. And in that moment I understood, happiness doesn't come from what we hold on to, but from what we dare to let go of so we can find ourselves again. Sunday lunch that day filled the house with voices for the first time in years. The oak table wore a white lace cloth, and the gumbo's scent lingered in the air. Tyler, Lina, Nora, and Mrs. Gutierrez, everyone was there, sharing a meal that seemed ordinary but held an entire journey of forgiveness. Lina helped plate dessert, Nora brought apple cider, and Tyler fumbled around looking for a place to stash the plastic containers. As I washed my hands, I teased, "Do you have any idea how much those containers once tortured me?" Tyler laughed, pulled a small roll of labels from his pocket, and tilted his head. "I do. That's why I came prepared." He stuck a label on a plastic container, neatly printed, "Mom, do not touch." The whole table burst out laughing. The sound cracked something heavy that had sat on this house for so long. Mrs. Gutierrez dabbed her eyes, laughing and crying at once. Now I believe in miracles, they just sometimes arrive 6 months late. The meal drifted along in warm stories. Tyler talked about his new job, extra shifts, and a possible promotion to oversee the warehouse. Lina said she's taking professional baking classes. Nora shared about new families in the support group. When the last cup of tea was poured, everyone fell quiet for a few seconds. I looked around each familiar face, each voice, each glance, and realized I'd walked through the hardest road and come back to the simplest thing: peace. I started talking not like a teacher, but a fellow traveler. I told them about those first labels on the fridge, the nights I heard them plot to push me out, and the moment I learned to be silent, not from fear, but to prepare a counter with truth. They listened. No one interrupted. I didn't blame or condemn. I just said, "Some lessons cost tears and betrayed trust. But that price teaches us what we must never lose: our dignity." Tyler, sitting beside me, lowered his head, then quietly slipped off an old ring, the leftover from a broken marriage. He set it down and replaced it with a small leather cord and a metal tag etched with the word respect. "Mom," he said, voice tight but clear, "I can't erase what I did, but I can wear this to remember I only got you back when I learned respect." I touched the little tag, my heart trembling like I could hear Frank whisper, "Discipline is love in its hard form." I stood, walked to the small cupboard, opened it, and took out the silver USB I'd hidden while gathering evidence. I handed it to Tyler, my hand steady now. "This is what you should understand," I said, "so you never repeat it. Inside is everything I recorded from the days you forgot who you were to the day I made a choice that let both of us survive." Tyler took it and held on tight. He spoke slowly, his voice going rough. "You saved me, by making me face it." No one spoke. I saw Lena's eyes fill, Nora nod softly, and Mrs. Gutierrez press a hand to her chest. Out on the porch, San Antonio sunlight poured over the mesquite trees, changing leaves. A warm breeze moved the kitchen curtains. I looked at the bright yard where white roses crowded the path. The house that once trapped my fear had become a witness to courage. Tyler helped clear the table. Lena washed dishes. Nora turned on the old jazz. I heard the soft drum brush blend with the wind, and in that moment I knew, my story isn't just about loss, it's about how a woman learned to stand tall in her own home. I closed my old notebook and smiled, murmuring to myself, "Wealth isn't in the house, it's in what we refuse to let be taken our dignity." When everyone left, Tyler came back to give me a long hug. "I'll bring bread next Sunday, okay? Label it carefully," I said, and we both laughed. When the door closed, I went back in and sat at the table. There was still a plastic container with the words, "Mom, do not touch," sitting in the bright kitchen. I didn't peel it off. I left it there as a reminder that we're only truly free when we protect what's ours without hurting anyone. I sat by the window, watched the sunset wash across the wall, and thought about the people hearing this story maybe far away, in a quiet home where they were made to believe they had no worth. I want them to know you can start again just once, say enough to whatever shrinks you. If you've listened this far, you probably know that feeling too. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. Share the moment you once said, "Enough, I truly want to read it." And if you found a bit of strength in this journey, please hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter. Thank you for staying to the very end. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person listening for people like me, people once pushed to the margins to feel a little less alone in our own lives. I turned off the lights and let the soft evening glow spill through the window. Outside, the San Antonio breeze moved again, brushing past the white roses, and I knew that this time it was moving through a house with dignity. "Give the master bedroom to us, and you can sleep in the basement tonight." My son said it so lightly, right as he rolled his suitcase through the door. Behind him, my daughter-in-law glided past me in dark sunglasses with that appraising look like someone touring a house she's about to buy. They brought 4 suitcases, a box with an electric cooktop, a few potted plants, and the familiar line, "We'll just stay for a bit. Don't worry." I stood frozen in the living room, the place that used to be the nest for me and Evan, watching them touch and rearrange my late husband's things. My heart went cold, but my lips still held a smile. Under my hem, my fingers gripped the safe key. They thought I was a compliant old woman who would bow my head and accept it. They didn't know I had quietly installed cameras. And the one who would leave this house in shame would not be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Claudia Hart, 66, living in a quiet suburb of Asheville, North Carolina. 6 years ago, my husband Evan died of a heart attack while tending the backyard garden. He left me just enough life insurance, plus the savings I'd put away over 30 years working part-time at a fabric shop called Cotton and Thread. I used all of it to buy this house, the first home ever in my name alone. I didn't choose it for luxury. I chose it because it felt like Evan. In late afternoon light, the warm wood tone pours across the living room. The small, tidy kitchen has a hook for the floral apron he once gave me. Every brick, every wall is the result of years I lived carefully and decently. And in 6 years of widowhood, I learned to enjoy being alone without feeling lonely. In the mornings, I walk with a small neighborhood group, 5 women in their 60s and 70s. We talk about everything, new TV shows to the apple pie someone's husband used to love. I learned to use a smartphone, set up WhatsApp, Facebook, then Instagram, where I post photos of the rose, a garden out back in bloom. Every 2 weeks, I go to a little salon on Main Street to keep my hair a chestnut brown. The color, Evan said, made me look like autumn smiling. I thought my life had settled back into a calm rhythm. Until that afternoon, when the door opened and Dylan walked in with Harper. Dylan, my only son, 35, used to be gentle and sweet, but life wore that down. After Evan died, he started changing, calling less, visiting less, and whenever he did, it was to borrow money. I could never turn him down. A mother, even knowing her child isn't perfect, keeps believing he's just going through a rough patch. But this time was different. He didn't bring the usual awkwardness. He brought the unnerving ease of someone who had a plan. Harper followed, her heels striking the wood floor with firm, even steps. She didn't look at me like a mother-in-law. She looked at me like an asset to be evaluated. "Oh, Claudia, this house has so much potential," she said, opening doors, glancing at the walls and ceiling, then stopping at the old Tiffany lamp what Evan and I bought on our 30th anniversary trip. "If we switch to LED and change the metal frame, it'll look much brighter." Claudia, she didn't call me Mom, not even Mrs. Hart. Just Claudia, a stranger's name in my own house. I swallowed and smiled. "You must be tired. I'll set up the living room so you can rest a while." "No need," Dylan cut in, voice firm. "We'll take the master. It's bigger and closer to the bathroom. You can stay in the basement for a few days." I heard my own thoughts shout. The basement? The room where Evan kept garden tools, cold and damp? But I said nothing. I nodded, the reflex of someone far too used to giving way. That night, after they shut the master bedroom door, I sat in the kitchen, listening only to the vent fan and the slow clink of a spoon in my chamomile tea. I tried not to listen, but I heard Harper's laugh, Dylan's voice. "Yeah, I know. The place is old, but a few updates and it'll sell for a good price. We need to talk her into it, or at least get her to sign a few papers to make things easier later." Then they laughed. I sat still, gripping the cup until the heat was gone. The next morning, I went on my walk as usual. Maeve, my closest friend, took one look at me and asked, "You look worn out. What happened?" I told her everything, how Dylan and Harper had suddenly moved in, how they acted like homeowners, and that line about, "You take the basement." Maeve stopped, studied me, then said, "Claudia, that house is yours. You worked your whole life for it. No one has the right to walk in without permission. Don't let kindness blur your judgment." I nodded, but deep down I felt something heavier than fear, the sadness of a mother losing authority over her own life. When I got back, the living room was different. The cream sofa I bought during a spring sale had been pushed to the opposite wall. The floral pillows I loved because they matched my garden roses were tossed in a corner. The wedding photo of Evan and me taken in a field of tulips in Seattle had been taken down and replaced by a gray-black abstract print. "What do you think?" Harper asked brightly. "Much more modern, right?" I looked around the room where Evan and I drank tea every evening. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar. I answered softly, "Yes, it's modern." Harper all but took over the kitchen. She moved all my dishes to the highest shelves, then brought in a flood of organic items, expensive olive oil, cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses arranged like a model condo in a magazine. Whenever I started to cook, she'd appear with a smile. "I've got it, Claudia. You've cooked your whole life. It's time to rest." It sounded caring, but the tone was erasing me. Dylan was different. He lay on the sofa all day, scrolling his phone, sometimes heading out without saying where. When I asked about work, he just said, "Don't worry, I'm waiting on a few calls." But I knew it had been more than 8 months since he left the construction company. I didn't want to keep score, but after 3 weeks my bank balance was dropping fast. Grocery bills doubled and Harper borrowed my card to place online orders. I realized I was paying for things that weren't mine. One evening, standing in my bedroom, I looked out the window. A warm glow from the master bedroom fell across the lawn, and I heard the soft laughter of two young people making calculations. I opened my cabinet and took out a small wooden box. Inside were the deed, Evan's will, and old savings books. Everything was still there. I closed the lid, placed my hand on top, and breathed in. In that moment I knew. If I stayed silent, they would take everything. Not just the house, but my self-respect and the rest of my life. The next morning I went to the electronics store near Walmart and bought 2 mini cameras, thumb-sized, Wi-Fi, viewable on my phone. The clerk kindly showed me how to use them, assuming I wanted to protect against burglars. He didn't know the burglars were already inside. That night, I installed one behind a Mexican ceramic vase in the living room, angled toward the kitchen. I opened my phone and saw a crisp image, catching even the smallest movement. I felt something strange, pain and clarity at once. I told myself, watch first, talk later. I was no longer the shaky woman after Evan died. I'd rebuilt a life once. I could do it again this time to protect what I made with my own 2 hands. Outside, evening settled. Light touched the window frame, washing the wedding photo I had rehung in amber. Evan was still smiling. I whispered, "It's okay, love. I'll keep this house safe." And as the night closed in, the tiny camera began to record. The real story had only just begun. The first camera I placed behind the Mexican vase on the cabinet, right at the living room corner. From there, the thumb-size lens could see almost the entire room, even the kitchen where Harper moved in and out like it was her private domain. I kept the second camera in a drawer, waiting for the right spot. I wasn't in a hurry. I knew this game needed time. On day 1 after installing it, I sat on my bed and opened the app. The screen showed Harper with a tape measure, checking the curtains. She said casually, "These curtains are outdated. We should switch to automatic ones with a remote. It'll look more upscale." Dylan stood beside her, jotting notes in a small notebook, nodding like a tech assistant. "Yeah, the house will definitely look brighter," he said, oblivious to whose house it was. I sat there watching, a chill running down my spine. Every small laugh from Harper, every touch of her hand on the walls and frames, felt like they were peeling the warmth off. This place, layer by layer. From that day, Harper started what she called a kitchen restructuring. I called it something else, erasing me. She moved my things to the highest shelves, places I couldn't reach, even on tiptoe. She called the soft green ceramic bowls Evan bought at a local market outdated in their place, cold, plain white plates. Whenever I walked in to cook, Harper appeared right away, voice sweet but directive. "I'll do it, Claudia. You should rest. You've cooked your whole life. Now I'll take care of you." It sounded polite, but her eyes scanned knives and fridge shelves like an inventory. One morning, I set out to make my usual banana bread. I opened the cabinet and froze flour, eggs, milk, all gone. In their place were cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses, almond milk, and pricey granola. I asked, "Harper, where did you put my things?" She shrugged, smiling lightly. I tidied up. "Old stuff isn't great for your health, Claudia." For the first time ever, I felt like a guest in my own kitchen. The weekly grocery emails kept climbing, from $80 to $100 to $270. I knew I wasn't the one spending like that. But when I asked, Dylan would say, "Don't worry. Harper knows how to balance a budget." One evening I opened the fridge. Amid the fancy cheeses and detox juices sat a bag of bread I'd bought the week before, covered in green mold. I picked it up, stared at the fuzz on the crust, and felt my throat tighten. I set it down and sat at the table where Evan used to read the paper each morning, and cried quietly. Not from hunger, but from being cut out of the picture of my own life. About a week later, I checked the camera again. The feed was clear, Harper on the sofa, phone to her ear. Her voice came through the tiny speaker. "I'm serious. This area's values are rising fast. If we list at the right time, we can get over 300,000. My mother-in-law won't live forever. This house will be ours sooner or later." I saw Dylan walk by and ask, "Lo, what if Mom finds out?" Harper chuckled. "Let me handle it. We just need her to sign a few information updates." I felt my heart pound, not from fear, but awakening. I hit save, time-stamped the clip, and moved it to a special folder. On my table, the note Maeve had me stick up was still there. Record everything. Don't trust promises, trust proof. I numbered each file and wrote a caption. Harper, talking about listing the house June 12th. For the first time in days, I felt strangely calm. That night, sitting by the Tiffany lamp, I thought of Evan. He used to say, "A home holds your spirit, Claudie. Keep it clean, not just with polish, but with self-respect." I looked at the brown leather armchair where he always read the paper, the armrest darkened by 40 years of his hand. I laid my palm there, the leather cool, the memory warm. I knew if Evan were here, he wouldn't let anyone touch this house with that attitude. But I also knew he'd want me to fight wisely, not with rage, but with reason. The next day, I reopened the materials from an elder rights and homeownership community class I'd taken last year. Among the instructors was Talia Chen, a young attorney who spoke clearly and had a smile that made you trust her. I found her card again. The number was still in my wallet. That afternoon I called, "Talia, this is Claudia Hart. We met in the elder rights class. I think I need your advice." Her voice was steady and warm. "Yes, Miss Hart. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll review your house documents." The next morning I drove Evan's old gray Subaru, nearly 20 years old, downtown to Talia's office. She greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of tea. "Did you bring the house papers?" she asked. I opened my bag and pulled out an old folder. Deed, purchase, contract, insurance receipts, Evan's will. Talia read each page, sometimes jotting notes. When she finished, she looked up and said firmly, "You are the sole legal owner. No one can remove you from this home without your consent, and right now, you haven't signed any power of attorney or transfer documents. That means you retain full control." I nodded, feeling a little lighter, but Talia wasn't done. She added, "However, you need to secure your documents right away. I recommend you photograph everything and give a copy to someone you trust. Also, change your email and bank passwords and check whether anyone has been added as a beneficiary." I wrote down every line. Talia looked at me and asked quietly, "Are they living with you now?" "Yes," I said. "My son and his wife." Her eyes dimmed slightly. "Then I want you to gather more proof of intent to take over texts, calls, recordings. If they stay and show possession or coercion, you can request a lawful eviction order." I asked, "What if they refuse to leave?" Talia said, "You're not alone, Miss Hart. The law protects you, but we need evidence." Driving home, I turned on the radio. Blue Moon of Kentucky came on Evan's song whenever he fixed the fence. I smiled. Talia's words lingered. "You're not alone." That afternoon I got home and found Harper taping color samples to the wall. Dylan was browsing real estate sites. Harper turned, smiling. "I'm drafting a plan to redo the living room, Claudia. I want to make this an open space like the model homes in Charlotte." I smiled, hiding my real expression behind my cup of tea. Sounds ambitious. That night, I went to my room and shut the door. On my phone, Harper was still on-screen, tape measure in hand, lips moving, the mic too far to catch it all. I tapped record. From that moment, I understood. I had officially entered the fight to take back my home. Light from the Tiffany lamp reflected across the wall, laying a soft gold on my face. I touched Evan's photo frame and murmured, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. They haven't won. And in the quiet, the house seemed to listen. Only the tiny camera blinked steady, small like the first spark of justice. I didn't need many days to see Harper wasn't just updating the house. She was setting up a deal. That morning, I'd just made chamomile tea when the front door opened. Harper came in with a polished smile. "Claudia, I have a friend dropping by to take a look at a few details just for reference." I glanced at her spotless heels. This wasn't a casual visit. A moment later, the doorbell rang. A young man with gelled hair, crisp white shirt, leather briefcase stepped in. Harper beamed. "This is Colin, a real estate agent, an old classmate. He knows this area well and wants to help estimate the value of Mom's house." My heart went cold. "Mom's house? Not my house." She said estimate like a breeze, but I knew when an agent walks in, they've already considered a sale. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching through the crack. Harper poured coffee using the commemorative porcelain set Evan gave me for my 40th birthday, a set I never let anyone touch. She set the tray down, turning her back to the camera hidden behind the vase. Colin sat and opened his tablet, voice upbeat. "This place has great potential. With this square footage, if you update the interiors, change the floors, repaint, you're looking at $310,000 to $330,000, depending on timing." Harper tilted her head, sugar sweet. "What if we change the door frames and add automatic shades?" Colin nodded. "Tack on a few thousand and you're set. South Asheville's hot right now, so this is a golden time to list." I heard pen scratching paper. Dylan, seated beside him, asked in a tone so casual it chilled me, "Hey, let's say, the house is still in my mom's name after we renovate. Can we switch ownership after the sale?" Colin hesitated. "Legally, you need the owner's signature. But if the family agrees, the process is quick." Harper cut in. "Oh, she agrees to everything, she just gets mixed up with paperwork. She's not into managing this stuff anymore." They laughed, and a spoon clinked against porcelain metal on china, like a needle pricking my heart. I didn't step out. I sat in my bedroom, watching the live feed, Harper playing dutiful daughter-in-law before the agent, and Dylan, the boy I carried while Evan traveled for work, now nodding like an accomplice. My hands shook so much I set the cup down. But I didn't cry. Tears would only make them stronger. I needed clarity. After nearly an hour, Colin stood, shook Harper's hand, and said, "I'll prep a detailed valuation. With some decluttering and photos, you could list in 2 weeks. Congratulations, you've got a valuable asset." Harper beamed, as if she'd just closed a great deal. The door shut, leaving the smell of coffee mixed with the vanilla room spray Harper liked thick and artificial. I quietly turned off my phone and sat still until my heart settled. From the living room, Harper's voice rose clear and cold. "I'll call the lender about the deposit for the South Asheville place. Good schools. Quiet. Perfect for a family." Dylan mumbled. "What about Mom?" Harper answered, lower but still audible on the mic. "Senior living. I found a place with great reviews, private rooms, quiet. On paper, it looks perfect. She'll adjust." I let out a dry, strangled laugh. "Senior living. That's what they called their plan to push me out, dressed up in pretty words." I took out my phone and exported the video. 3 clips. Harper entertaining the agent, Dylan asking about switching ownership later, and the line about senior living. I sent everything to Talia, with a short note. "Here's proof of intent to take over. They're moving on the first steps." In under 10 minutes, Talia replied, 24-karat evidence. Keep the originals untouched. I'll guide next steps. And Claudia, you're doing everything right." Just 4 lines, but it felt like someone had breathed life back into me. In this fight, I wasn't alone. When night fell, I walked into the living room. Harper and Dylan had gone out to dinner. The house was unusually quiet, only the wall clock ticking. I moved slowly through the room, touching the old things, the Tiffany lamp still casting warm gold, the leather armchair still dented where Evan used to sit. I lifted our wedding photo, the one Harper had removed, and hung it back where it belonged. Evan was still smiling in it, pride in his eyes. I whispered, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. I won't let them turn this home into a cheap commodity." Then, I took a small notebook and wrote, in steady strokes, June 14th. They brought an agent to appraise the house. They discussed selling and a new place in South Asheville. I sat 2 walls away and heard every word. They decided I was invisible. And because of that, I'll make sure they see me in a way they won't expect. I closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table. Outside, a thin moon rose, washing a pale glow over the living room wall. I turned off all the lights except the Tiffany lamp, the lamp that was Evan's, and now stands guard over my honor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold, thinking about everything. About Evan, about the son I once believed was a good man, about the daughter-in-law planning each move. I didn't feel hatred, just a raw emptiness like someone had scooped out my softest part and packed it with ice. I opened the notebook and added one last line. June 14th, I set a 7-day deadline, 7 days to prepare a counterplan. I didn't. I know exactly how everything would play out, but I knew I wouldn't sit still. I would collect, record, and protect every inch of this house of what is mine. Early morning, the first sunlight streamed into the living room. I sat by the window frame, watching tiny dust motes sparkle in the light like millions of floating memories. Outside, Harper's car sounded. I heard her voice carrying on the phone. "Yeah, Colin. Please email the valuation. We want to list next week if my mother-in-law signs quickly." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my head, Talia's voice was clear. Don't confront them head-on before it's time. Let them expose themselves. I smiled, smoothed my hair, and stood up. On the table, my wedding photo with Evan caught the sun, shimmering like a reminder. There are things people can buy but never truly own, and this house is one of them. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Asheville air was a little crisp, dew still clinging to the rose, canes on the porch. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face with wrinkles no longer made me sad. I chose a beige dress in the soft fabric Evan liked and put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 25th anniversary. In the mirror, the light reflected a woman I had once forgotten, not the gentle old lady they imagined, but Claudia Hart, who worked 30 years and paid for this house down to the last dollar. I brewed coffee, the whole bean kind Evan loved, kept in a glass jar. When the aroma filled the kitchen, I knew I was ready. Around 8:30, Dylan and Harper woke up. They had argued in low voices in their room, then came out looking tired. I sat at the table, hands around my coffee cup, voice even, "We need to talk." Dylan frowned slightly, and before he could react, I continued, firmer than even I expected. "I bought this house. I decide who lives here and for how long. Any changes in this house require my consent." As the words landed, the room seemed to pause. Dylan blinked, staring at me like he was trying to recognize whether the woman in front of him was really his mother. "Mom, why are you saying this out of nowhere?" I thought. "You thought I would keep staying silent?" I cut in, eyes on him. "No, Dylan, my silence hasn't meant consent." Harper stepped out, phone in hand, lips tilted in a half-smirk, half-challenge. "Claudia, you must be misremembering. This house was bought with Dad's life insurance, and Dylan should have a share of that. I'm only helping you modernize it." I set my cup down, voice low but precise. "No, Harper. I'm not misremembering. I signed the contract, my name is on the deed, and I've paid every property tax for 6 years. This is my legal asset." I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The camera clip came up, Colin the real estate agent, voice clear. "The price could reach $310,000 to $330,000 if you list at the right time." I tapped again. Harper's voice came through, sharp. "I'll handle the paperwork. My mother-in-law won't live forever." Senior living sounds good anyway. Senior living echoed through the room like a knife. Dylan whipped toward Harper, face flushing. You said that?" Harper froze, her voice catching. "I was joking." I turned off the TV and faced them. "No need to argue," I said evenly. "I don't need excuses. I only want you to understand one thing. I know everything." Dylan forced a smile. "Mom, you recorded us? Why would you do that?" I answered plainly. "No. I protected my home." I stood and pulled a paper from the envelope I'd placed on the table, the printout from my attorney, Talia Chen. "I've retained an attorney," I said. "If, 7 days from today, you have not moved out, she will file for eviction and a no trespass order with the court." Harper's eyes widened, her voice harsh. "You can't do that. We're family." I nodded. "Yes, but family doesn't mean permission to violate boundaries. Family means respect, not exploitation." Dylan lowered his head. I could see him wrestling with embarrassment and anger. "Mom, I just wanted to ease your burden. This house needs maintenance, someone to take care of it. I didn't mean I cut in. You let someone else decide everything in my kitchen without me. That's not helping, Dylan, that's taking over." Harper shifted tactics fast. She inhaled, softened her tone, eyes glossing like she might cry. "I only want you to have a better life. I'm afraid you're lonely. Things here are old, updating them would make you happier. I meant no harm." I looked at her for a long moment. I had been a woman who knew how to cry to diffuse conflict. I recognized purposeful tears. "Harper," I said slowly, "if you truly wanted to help, you would ask before acting. You would respect what belongs to someone else. If you only want to replace, that isn't help, that's erasure." Harper lowered her gaze, silent. Dylan sat down, fingers laced, lips tight. I exhaled light but steady. "From now on, there are 3 rules in this house. 1, respect. No one changes anything without my approval. 2, ask. Every expense, every plan must be transparent. 3, share costs. I am not a bank and not a sponsor. If you can't meet these 3, then you leave." The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking, counting the seconds stretching between us. Dylan lifted his head, voice unsteady. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't be so tense. Can I give you a hug?" I stepped back. "No, Dylan. Gestures don't replace responsibility. You don't need to hug me, you need to understand me." He froze, hands suspended. His eyes glistened, then dropped. I felt no triumph, only a bone-deep sadness, a quiet space between 2 generations. I turned to Harper, gentler but firm. "I'm giving you 7 days. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you time to choose, comply or leave." Harper looked away, lips pressed tight. Dylan started to speak, then didn't. I cleared my cup and carried it to the sink. Under the sound of running water, I felt a settled calm. In the 6 years since Evan died, this was the first time I truly felt in control of my life. At noon, I sat on the porch and texted Maeve. I told them, 7 days. If anything happens, can you stand as my witness?" She replied immediately, "Of course." "And Claudia? You came back today, not the quiet one anymore." I set the phone down and looked at the roses. Sunlight hit the red petals, gleaming like jewels. I thought maybe Evan was watching me from somewhere, smiling. In the afternoon, Harper moved through the kitchen, cleaning in silence. Dylan went to the yard to make a call, voice low. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I had a plan, evidence, an attorney, a friend beside me, and, more than anything, put myself back. Night fell, the house quiet. I sat before the wedding photo, the Tiffany lamp warming Evan's face. I whispered, "Do you see, love?" I finally stood up. I spoke again in my own voice. I smiled slightly, sure of one thing more than ever. I'm no longer the compliant Claudia they knew. I am the mother, the woman no one can erase from this house. That night, wind pushed hard along the porch, the damp smell of earth slipping through the doorframe after rain. I was about to turn off the light when I heard a spoon hit a porcelain cup in the living room. A small sound, but in a silent house it felt like the opening cue for another battle. I stopped, kept the lights off. Through the crack of my door, pale yellow spilled from the living room where Harper and Dylan sat facing each other. I quietly opened the camera app on my phone and switched to record. Every word came through as if the walls themselves were carrying it to me. "You're too weak, Dylan," Harper hissed. "I told you if you don't act decisively, your mother will never leave. She's playing the victim to gain sympathy." Dylan answered, tired. "You're pushing this too far. I just wanted to stay for a while. You turned it into a whole plan to take the house. Do you know Mom already found a lawyer?" Harper lowered her voice, but the mic still caught it. "You think I don't know? It's just a scare tactic. An old woman in her 60s, hands shaking when she signs. What can she do?" I clenched my phone, heart pounding, but I still didn't step out. Not out of fear, but because I needed them to say it all, so this house, its walls, would remember everything. Next morning, when they went out, I installed the second camera in the hallway above the landscape painting. From there, it could see my bedroom door, the stairs, and the kitchen. Every movement saved to the cloud, second by second. That afternoon, I replayed the footage. What I saw tightened my throat. Harper and Dylan were in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. They folded my coats, the knit scarves I made, even Evan's porcelain set. Each item went into boxes labeled donation. Harper said breezily, "Just pack first. She never uses this stuff anyway." Dylan stayed quiet, head down as he closed the lids. Watching that on my screen, I felt something in me fracture. Not because they took things, but because they acted as if I had already disappeared. The next day at noon, Harper sat on the porch making a call. I sat in the kitchen, quietly listening through the camera. "Hi, Miss Ruth," Harper said sweetly. "Remember me? I mentioned my mother-in-law the other day. I think you should come talk to her. She seems confused, not very coherent." I knew immediately she meant Ruth Navarro. A mediator Harper had mentioned, someone who handles families with elders needing guardianship. Harper added, voice dropping, "If possible, could you also bring up a power of attorney so we can help manage her finances? Tomorrow afternoon?" I set down my teacup, my chest sinking. So after failing with the agent, they chose to attack my capacity. The following afternoon, Ruth arrived, a woman around 50, neat curls, half-rimmed glasses, carrying a large leather bag. Harper welcomed her warmly, as if hosting a consultation in her own home. I poured coffee, set it gently on the table. "Please," I said, calm. Ruth smiled, but her eyes scanned the house like an appraisal. "Thank you. I just want to chat a little. Your son and his wife said you've had trouble managing your assets lately, is that right?" I glanced at Harper, who lowered her head in a worried pose. Dylan sat silent. I took a sip and said, "No. I'm lucid enough to know who was in my home and who tried to change the locks without asking." Ruth paused, then kept her smile. "I understand. Sometimes a financial power of attorney can reduce stress. At this age, paperwork mistakes can cause issues." I opened my bag and pulled the envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a letter from my family doctor, Dr. Simmons, who examined me last week. "This is my capacity statement," I said, sliding it to Ruth. "My doctor confirms I'm fully competent, memory intact, with no signs of cognitive decline." Ruth read a few lines, then nodded slowly. I see. Her initial confidence faded. Harper jumped in, trying to recover. Miss Ruth, I only meant she should have support. Not that we doubt her, Dylan added. We just want to protect Mom. I looked at them both, voice quiet but firm. If you want to protect, start by not lying. No one spoke. Ruth's eyes shifted. She stood and said neutrally, I understand. Perhaps this isn't the right time. Keep my card in case you want to talk further. I smiled and accepted the card like a piece of evidence. Thank you, Ruth. I'll keep it safe. She left in silence. Harper looked at me, trying to appear composed, but her hand trembled around the cup. Dylan avoided my eyes and muttered, Mom, you misunderstood. I didn't answer. I just tapped stop recording in my pocket, every word of the conversation saved. That night I sent the audio file to Talia with a note. They brought in a mediator, mentioned financial power of attorney. I have evidence. In under 10 minutes, Talia replied. Perfect, Claudia. You're doing exactly right. Keep the original files. Tomorrow I'll send the notice to terminate their stay. Be ready. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The house was quiet. I could hear light rain on the roof, steady as the heartbeat of the one who's gone, Evan, who always believed every home has a soul. Next morning, Maeve arrived in a jean jacket with a big tote. What's next, Claudie? She asked, eyes tender and encouraging. I opened the cabinet and pointed to the boxes labeled donation. Relabel everything. I won't let even one of Evan's scarves be stamped as charity. Have you ever seen someone try to redefine an elder's capacity? In this part, what angered you most, the donation boxes or the POA suggestion? Tell me in the comments, so this story can become a shared voice. We worked all morning. Maeve replaced labels. I made an inventory. The important things, deed, insurance papers, savings. I put into the auxiliary safe in my bedroom. Maeve kept the spare key. We locked it and carried the file bag to her house 3 blocks away. Safer with me, she said. Talia said the same. And Claudie, don't forget to change every password. I nodded. That evening I changed every bank, email, and the smart lock on the front door. Each time the keypad lit, it felt like I was closing another door they'd opened without permission. Late at night, I printed the termination notice under North Carolina law from Talia's email. I read every line carefully, then added a handwritten closing. The violators must vacate within 7 days from the date signed. If not, the owner reserves the right to request law enforcement intervention. I signed at the bottom, my handwriting shaky but clear. Then I taped the notice discreetly in the kitchen, just under the cabinet right where Harper opened every morning for her juice glass. I stepped back, watched the white paper glow under the warm light, and felt like I'd hung a protective charm. Outside, wind nudged the curtains. The house was silent, but I knew its walls had heard everything, heard their plans, heard my words, and now stood with me. I turned off the light and whispered, Listen, Evan, hear me, I finally learned how to protect myself. In the dark, the porch wind sounded like an answer, warm and steady. On the 3rd morning after I posted the notice in the kitchen, the house was strangely quiet. No yoga music from Harper, fewer footsteps from Dylan. I thought they were preparing to leave quietly until Harper walked into the kitchen, resting a hand lightly on her stomach, her face a mix of stress and calculation. Claudia, she called, softer and slower than usual. I need to talk to you. I was wiping the table and looked up. Morning light crossed her face pale, trying to appear fragile. I'm pregnant, Harper said, eyes down, voice barely above a breath. I paused half a beat. The words dropped into the kitchen like a pebble into a deep well, quiet but seismic. I set the cloth down and drew a long breath. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded, fingers laced over her belly like cradling a life already here. Just 6 weeks. We haven't told anyone. I don't want to make things worse. I just hope you understand we can't move out now. Harper lifted her head. Her voice shook, but her eyes brightened like someone who'd found a winning card. For the baby, Mom, you were a mother, you understand. I just need a stable place, at least until I give birth. After that, we'll go. I went quiet. In my mind flashed the young Evan when I was pregnant with Dylan, how he prepared everything, from the little crib to the body pillow. I know the fear and tenderness of a mother-to-be, but I also remembered Talia's words very clearly from our consult last week. Pregnancy doesn't create residency rights or property ownership, Claudia. Don't let feelings derail judgment. Good hearts can be exploited through their kindest instincts. I poured water, my hand still faintly shaking. Harper, I said softly, I bless the baby, but that doesn't change the boundary. This is my home, and I was clear about the 7-day deadline. I won't take it back. Harper stared at me for a few seconds, then her look shifted to wounded anger. You're heartless, she snapped. You're throwing your pregnant daughter-in-law out on the street? What kind of mother-in-law does that? I breathed in. I'm not throwing anyone out. I'm asking you to leave a place you tried to take. There's a difference, Harper. Dylan came down the stairs, face confused. Harper, come on, he said quietly. Don't do this. Be quiet, she shot back. Don't you see she has no heart? She only cares about the house, not blood. Dylan stayed silent, avoiding my eyes. I knew my son was stuck in the middle, but this time I didn't try to rescue the moment. I looked straight at Harper. Don't use the baby as a shield to justify crossing boundaries, Harper. A good mother starts with honesty, not manipulation. The air turned heavy. Harper opened her mouth to speak, then didn't. I turned, opened the drawer, and pulled out the paper I had prepared. This is the final notice, I said, setting it on the table. 7 days starting today. I wrote it by hand and signed it clearly. When the deadline comes, I'll proceed under the law. Harper looked at the paper like it was a sentence. Dylan lowered his head, lips pressed tight. I folded the dishcloth, hung it back on the hook, and left the kitchen without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the dark. Outside, wind hissed softly through the trees. I thought of Evan, his voice in hard times, always low and steady. Keep the house, keep your honor. Don't let anyone decide for you what home is. I turned to the side and touched the wedding photo on the nightstand. Evan, I whispered, I'm doing what you would do, right? Tears fell onto the pillow, and I didn't wipe them away. Some tears don't belong to weakness, they belong to someone reclaiming ownership. Before sunrise, I got up. Pale blue light seeped through the curtains like thin mist. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and plugged in the external drive. Every video file, audio clip, journal entry, and photo of the notice in the kitchen, I gathered them into one folder and named it Proof 7 Days. I sent that package to Talia with a message. This is all the evidence I have. I want everything clear before the deadline. 10 minutes later, she replied, Very good, Claudia. I have everything. You're on the right track. Stay calm, I'll monitor the legal side. Reading that line eased me. In the chaos of betrayal, at least one person believed me, and we had a clear plan. Near noon, Maeve stopped by with 2 smoothies and a soft smile. Walk? She asked. It's a beautiful day. We went along the little neighborhood road. Maple leaves drifted down, cool air brushing like a soothing hand. I told her briefly that Harper was pregnant, my voice dropping. Maeve listened, then laid a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Pregnancy isn't a free pass. If you cave now, you'll lose everything later. Hey, try the 4-7-8 breathing. Talia taught me during that. Mess with my brother. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. Keep doing it settles the nerves. I followed. Inhale 4 beats, hold 7, exhale 8. Wind slipped through my hair, and someone's rose garden sent a faint scent. My chest loosened, like a knot finally untied. That afternoon the kitchen was quiet. Harper and Dylan had gone out. I stood in the familiar room, light falling across the old wooden counter. On the shelf sat Evan's tea set, the one Harper used to serve the agent, without asking me. I took a soft cloth and wiped each piece, carefully, like touching a memory. Every tiny scratch in the porcelain was a slice of time mornings at the window, him with the paper, me with the kettle. I put the set back exactly where it used to be, a small ritual of taking ownership back. My hands were steady now. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't fighting to push someone out. I was protecting the place that once held the heart of a marriage, of youth, of memory. That evening I wrote in my journal, June 17th, Harper says she's pregnant. I believe it, but I won't let it blind me. I am not against a child, I am against deceit. Evan, you taught me that kindness without boundaries becomes a trap. I understand that now. I closed the book and listened to the wind threading through the eaves. Somewhere in the house, the walls stayed silent, but I felt them watching, witnessing each step as I reclaimed my place. Outside, a light rain began. I turned off the lamp and stood at the window. In the dark, I spoke quietly, not for anyone else but for myself. Keep the house. Keep your honor. Keep your calm. Then I left the kitchen, the scent of coffee and the ticking clock behind me, the familiar breath of a home waking from a long sleep of silence. Friday evening, the last sunlight pooled on the porch like slow honey. The wall clock struck 6, 1 beat at a time. I stood in the living room and heard a car stop at the curb. Talia texted, "I'm here, waiting in the car. Officer Jackson is with me, per schedule, just in case." I looked through the window, a silver SUV at the curb. Talia stepped out in a white shirt and gray vest, composed. Next to her stood a uniformed officer with a notebook. They wouldn't come in unless needed. I gave a slight nod through the glass, letting them know I was fine. Inside, the hard scrape of a suitcase dragged across the floor. Harper was closing the last box. Her perfume mixed with cardboard dust, thickening the air. Dylan stood by the stairs, hands in his pockets, eyes down. "We're not done," Harper said without looking up. "Can you give us a few more hours?" "I already gave 2 weeks," I answered even. "It's 6 o'clock the deadline," I stated in writing. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm following the law." She flipped her hair and curled a thin smile. "Law, law, always the law. In the end, what do you have besides this house?" I looked straight at her, not angry, just calm. "I have the truth and legal records." "You have words." Dylan stepped closer, voice small but edged. "Mom, I don't want drama, but if you're this rigid, I'll tell Dad's side of the family. Everyone will hear how you treated your son and daughter-in-law." I exhaled not from fear, but from sadness that he still believed truth could be drowned out by noise. "Tell whoever you want," I said slowly. "But I have evidence, video, audio, and my attorney's statement. I don't need threats. I have facts." Silence fell. The clock ticked again, counting the last seconds of their hold on my home. Harper gripped the suitcase handle, eyes cold. "I hope this empty house makes you happy," she said sweetly enough to sting. "It isn't empty," I said softly. "It's clean." She turned and rolled the suitcase out the door. Dylan followed, stopped for a second, and looked back at me. His eyes swirled with regret and pride. I couldn't read it, so I said one last thing. "Dylan, I hope you find your self-respect before you try to find your mother again." The door clicked shut. That small clack was the first sound of freedom. The house was so quiet I could hear wind nudging the window frames. I stood in the living room as the last light spread gold across the floor like a fresh cover. No footsteps, No synthetic essential oils smothering Evan's coffee. No appraising eyes, only relief. I sat on the sofa, felt the cushion give. Beside me lay the embroidered floral pillow I thought Harper had thrown out. I smoothed the fabric and whispered, "This house is mine again." My voice was small, but in that quiet space, it felt like a declaration. Half an hour later, a knock. Maeve walked in with a paper bag and a bright grin. "Mission accomplished?" I laughed. "Completely. They left at 6 o'clock sharp. Then it's time to celebrate." She lifted the bag. Butter-filled, waffles, and fresh ground coffee. "I'm brewing." We nudged the table back, opened the windows to let the last of the evening light in. Air flowed free. Dust shimmered like golden threads. Maeve laid out the food. "I remember the first time I came here. Your house smelled like almond and linen. Lately it was nothing but sharp peppermint oil." I chuckled and poured coffee. "We're back now." Almond, coffee, and silence. She nodded. "Silence is a luxury too, Claudie." I opened the front door wide. The whole block glowed in sunset. Sparrows hopped along the fence. Neighbors laughed in their yards, and a far-off radio carried the evening news. Life slipped back into its rhythm, no longer occupied, no longer disturbed. Inside me, there was an odd, pleasant emptiness, not sadness, space to breathe. I texted Talia. "They're gone. No incident. Thank you for everything." She replied almost instantly. "I'm happy for you, Claudia. Watch the next few weeks. They might come back to demand items or stir trouble. If anything happens, call me or the police." I sent a thumbs up and set the phone down. That night, I put the house back in order. I started with the kitchen where it all began. I removed the spice jars Harper bought, dumped the spoiled turmeric, and reset the shelves my way. I grabbed a fresh set of sheets and changed the living room sofa. As the clean fabric slid into place, it felt like wiping away weeks of strain. The washer hummed, water flowed like a soothing soundtrack. On the shelf, I put on jazz Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Evan's favorite. The warm saxophone notes drifted through the rooms like a greeting from the past. I smiled. Harper was right about one thing. The house was empty, but empty clean, empty for real life to come back, not the pretend kind. Around 8, Maeve headed home. Before leaving, she hugged me light but warm. "I'm proud of you, Claudie. Not because you beat them, but because I came back to yourself." I smiled. "Me too. For the first time in years, I feel at peace inside my own walls." The door closed. I dimmed the lights, leaving only the Tiffany lamp's soft gold. The house rested, bathed in music. I sat at the dining table, pulled out a blank page, and wrote the first lines of my boundary list. 1. No one enters my home without my consent. 2. No one speaks for me, signs for me, or protects me by stripping my rights. 3. Kindness can be a gift, but kindness needs a fence. 4. Everything in this house holds a memory. If you touch it with respect. 5. If one day I grow weak, remember, I still have a voice and I will use it. I read it over and felt calm. This paper wasn't for Harper or Dylan. It was for my future self in case I ever forgot that I have the right to say no. I stuck it on the fridge between 2 photos, one of Evan and me at our 30th anniversary, and one Maeve took of us laughing on the porch. The light caught the ink, making the words glow. I sat on the sofa, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind in the curtains. There was no fear left in this house, only warmth, coffee, and the jazz fading down. I spoke softly, like closing a long chapter. "Welcome home, Claudia." And in that moment, I knew. Sometimes the biggest win isn't keeping a roof, it's finding yourself inside it. I thought after that Friday afternoon, everything would be quiet. I was wrong. The second storm didn't come through the front door, it came through familiar phones. Monday morning, while I was watering roses on the porch, the phone rang. The screen read, Aunt Nora. Evan's cousin, who cried in my arms at the funeral, who once said, "You're the best part of Evan that remains." "Claudia, what is going on?" Her voice was rough, irritated. "Dylan called me last night. Harper's pregnant and you kicked them out? How could you?" I took a breath, kept steady. "Aunt Nora, it's not that. Simple. No need to explain." She cut in. "A good mother knows how to sacrifice. You live alone in a big house, why not show some mercy?" I gripped the phone. Morning sun still lit the dew on the roses, but inside my sky dropped another floor. "Aunt," I said softly, "sacrifice only means something when it isn't being exploited." On the other end, silence. Then the line went dead. Soon after, the phone rang again. Cousin Jeff. He once stayed in my house 2 months after his divorce. Now his tone was half scolding, half sighing. "Hey, I heard from Dylan you're tense. Maybe give them another chance. Harper's about to be a mom." "Jeff," I asked, "have you listened to me at all? Or only to him?" He hesitated, then offered one line. "You're old, don't end up alone. Forgive." I hung up and set the phone on the table. For a moment, I heard my own blood in my ears. Not anger, hurt. People who once ate at my table and heard my stories. All about Evan now turned away after one call from Dylan. By noon, another call. Evan's old friend, Clarence. "Claudia, I heard you lost your temper and want to take your own son to court. Is that true?" "I'm not suing. I'm protecting my property. But that house is where Evan lived. Aren't you afraid people will say you forgot what you owe him?" I let out a small, dry laugh. "If Evan heard that, he'd crack up, Clarence. He taught me to keep what we built, not hand it to someone who disrespects it." Silence for a few seconds. Then he hung up. I sat and watched the screen light and dim. Each call was an accusation carried like an arrow, sent by people I once trusted. That afternoon, Maeve found me sitting on the porch, phone face down. "More calls?" she asked, handing me iced tea. "Yeah. Everyone has an opinion about a good mother. They forget to ask whether any good child makes his mother change the locks." Maeve sat, studied me, and said, softly, "Claudie, stop picking up. The ones who get you don't need your defense. The ones who don't, you could talk a lifetime and it won't matter." I nodded. She was right. That night, I silenced the phone. For the first time in years, I allowed myself not to hear everything. But not everyone called to accuse me. Near midnight, a text from Dylan lit the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. "When you're truly old, don't come to me." I read it again and again, my heart stinging but no longer collapsing. I typed back, "I don't need your care. I need respect, the very thing you didn't give." I hit send and took a long breath. Next morning, as I was making coffee, a video call came in. The name read, "Piper Hart, my brother's daughter, Marcus Jr.'s girl." "Auntie." Her voice was clear but trembling a little. "They're trashing you on Facebook, saying you're cold to Dylan. But I don't believe it. I know you're not like that." I smiled, eyes wet. "Thank you, Piper. Do you have proof?" she asked quietly, leaning toward the camera. I nodded. "I do. I kept everything. Here." I shared a short clip. Harper talking about senior living and listing the house. Piper went quiet, then said firmly, "I'll tell Dad." "Don't worry, you're not alone." The call ended, but my heart brightened a shade. In all that noise, someone still believed in the light of truth. That afternoon, Marcus, my brother, called. His voice was low and measured. "You holding up, Claudie?" "Mostly." "You?" "I heard Dylan's side, but I know him. He's impulsive and his wife eggs him on." "Your boy, You know how he is." I paused, then said, "I do, but knowing doesn't mean accepting." Marcus sighed, long and airy, like wind in old trees through the phone. "I'm proud of you. Stand firm. And Evan, if he were alive, I believe he'd stand beside you." This time, I cried for real, not from pain, but from being understood. After that call, I opened an old photo album on my computer. Pictures of Dylan as a kid, brown hair, clutching a chicken drumstick bigger than his wrist, smiling bright. I scrolled a 10th birthday, graduation, a shot of him hugging Evan after college. And then the latest, Dylan next to Harper, both staring at the laptop the day we talked about fixing the house. I looked at his face, the features were still my son's, but the eyes were different. Part of me wanted to blame Harper, but another part knew this betrayal had both their names on it. I closed the album, my heart lighter. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix the memory, I was simply accepting it. That night, under warm lamplight, I set up an easel in the living room. I hadn't painted since Evan died. Tonight, I needed to do something just for me. I mixed colors and painted the horizon behind the Blue Ridge, the route Evan and I drove every fall. Layer by layer, blue settled over. Soft violet. When I finished, I signed the lower right corner, C.H. 2 simple letters, but I had never written them for myself before. Every past painting was signed Claudia and Evan. I studied the canvas a long while, calm. Maybe this is how I close a chapter, not by erasing it, but by painting a new one over the top. That night, I slept straight through with no dreams. No doors slamming, no strange footsteps, just steady breathing and a hint of lavender in the air. The next morning, I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. Gentle sunlight lay over the rose garden in bloom. The flowers bent under the night's dew, so fresh it was as if they'd never known a storm. I took a photo, posted it on Instagram, and wrote, "At last, what needed to leave has left." The roses still bloom. Within minutes, the morning walking group sent a flood of hearts with little comments. "So beautiful, Claudie. You're making me want to plant roses today. Your house looks bright again." I smiled, took a sip of coffee, and felt as warm as the first light of day. The storm passed, and I'm still here, whole, clear, and free. Tuesday afternoon, while I was sweeping leaves in the yard, a silver sedan eased to a stop at the gate. I recognized it right away, the familiar plate, the familiar soft thud of the car door. Dylan got out first, shirt wrinkled, face tired. Harper followed, her belly showing more now. In the back seat, I saw Aunt Nora, blue fedora tilted to one side, eyes sharp like a freshly honed blade. I stood still, broom in hand, wind tipping the rose canes behind me. Harper spoke first, her voice part apology, part rehearsal. "Claudia, I'm sorry. We were really wrong. I know you're angry, but we have nowhere to go. The temporary place we rented is dirty and cramped, and I'm pregnant." She set her hand on her belly, a slow, calculated move. Dylan stared at the ground, silent like a boy forced to apologize without knowing why. I nodded slightly but said nothing. Harper took one more step, eyes shimmering. "We're just asking to stay a few days, until we find another place. Really? We only need a few weeks." I set the broom down, took a long breath, then lifted my hand to my chest. "Harper," I said, "I understand there's a life here that needs protecting." I gestured lightly toward her belly. "But here, I set my hand over my heart. There's someone else who needs protecting, and that person is me." Harper blinked, lips pressing together. Aunt Nora cleared her throat and stepped forward, voice tight and commanding, "Claudia, I know you're angry, but have you no humanity left? That's your own son, your blood." I turned to her, calm. "Aunt Nora, humanity doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. I learned that at too high a price. She rolled her eyes and jabbed, "You're old, don't be so bitter." I smiled. Age isn't a reason to lose boundaries. It's the reason to guard them even more. I invited them into the living room. The air was tight as a freshly cranked string. I set down a tea tray. A soft cinnamon rose scent lifted through the room. Dylan glanced around the house, looked the same, only neater, brighter. "Before you go on," I began, "I need to be clear. If you truly want to stay temporarily, I can only accept on non-negotiable conditions." Harper and Aunt Nora exchanged a look. Dylan frowned. I listed them slowly. 1. Respect no meddling, no changes, no touching my things. 2. Share household costs clearly. I don't support other adults. 3. A specific time frame, no open-ended stays. And last, if you truly want to stay, you sign a temporary lodging agreement with proper notarization. If any of these are missing, I refuse. Silence fell. Aunt Nora gave a short, scornful laugh. "Heavens! Do you think your home is a law firm? Papers and contracts with your own son?" "Claudia, bitterness is swallowing your heart." I answered evenly, "No. I'm letting reason protect my heart." Harper shifted tone quickly, softer, almost trembling. "I don't want to sign anything. I just want to rest. I'm exhausted. The doctor said I should avoid stress." She laid a hand on her belly and exhaled. "If you won't let us stay, then could you lend us money? We'll find another place." "Just a small amount, please." I looked at her a long time. "All right. But I need a repayment plan, a clear due date, and signatures from both of you." Harper faltered and glanced at Dylan. He avoided my eyes. "Mom, we don't know exactly yet. Once things settle, we'll send it back." "So there is no plan," I concluded, quiet but cool. "Then my answer is no." Aunt Nora sprang up, louder. "Claudia, who have you become? If Evan were alive, he'd be heartbroken. You're turning your son away and shutting the door on family?" I met her gaze, steady. "If Evan were alive, Aunt, he would understand. He taught me that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you." The air thickened. Harper stood, voice shaky but frosty. "I get it. You win. I hope this spotless house makes you happy." It sounded like a rerun of last time, except this time it didn't hurt. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Afternoon light poured in, warm and straight. "I don't need to win, Harper. I need peace." "The door stays open, but not to lies." Dylan looked up, a flicker of shame passing through his eyes, then lowered his head and pulled the suitcase. Aunt Nora shot me one last glare, and they all left. The door closed. The sound of wheels on the road faded, and then was gone. I stood for a while. The room was still, holding only the scent of cinnamon rose tea and pale light on the wall. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote a few lines. June 22nd. Dylan came back with Harper and Aunt Nora. They said sorry, they wanted to stay, then borrow money. I refused warmly but firmly. "I'm not angry anymore, I just won't let them cross my boundaries again." I signed my name, then scanned the entire meeting record with timestamps. I filed it carefully in a folder labeled Home Legal. Caution not from fear, but from learning to keep proof for my self-respect. That night, Maeve called. "Done, Claudie?" "Done," I laughed. "That chapter's closed." "Then let's see a movie tonight. I booked seats at the little theater on Main. Classic film, jazz score fits your mood." I chuckled and said yes. The tiny theater had maybe 20 seats, lights soft and low. The film was Roman Holiday. I sat in the middle, sipped soda, and listened to Audrey Hepburn laugh on screen. It felt strange, like youth had returned, but this time without the fear someone would snatch it away. When we left, night air lifted my hair, and vanilla drifted over from the bakery nearby. Maeve bought 2 crisp waffles and handed me one. Remember this smell? Evan loved these. I nodded, smiling. He did. But now it doesn't feel sad anymore. We walked and laughed, our shadows long on the lit sidewalk. Back home, I opened the door and turned on the kitchen light. The air was warm, touched with new vanilla from the bag. I set it on the table and poured a glass of warm milk. I sat and wrote in my journal, evening of June 22nd. They returned with apologies that smelled like a script. I listened, didn't soften. I opened the door, didn't let hatred in, but didn't let deceit stay. Love is respecting boundaries, not breaking them in the name of family. I closed the book and looked around the house. Everything was intact, not just the things, but the peace. I turned off the light, let the vanilla scent drift through the air, and smiled. Freedom has its own fragrance. Tonight, it's sweet. Saturday morning, I was watering plants when the doorbell rang, 3 short, urgent chimes. Not the mail carrier, not Maeve's knock. I cracked the door, and my heart paused. A young woman stood there, hair in a bun, tired but kind face. In her arms, a baby boy wrapped in a soft beige blanket. The faint smell of milk, powder, and newborn skin slipped into the space between us. "Mrs. Claudia?" Her voice shook, small as a breath. "I'm Harper's cousin. She asked me to bring baby Rowan to see you." I looked at the baby. Fine brown hair like silk threads, round cheeks, tiny hand loosely curled. He gave a small sound so faint, and somehow it felt like I'd just heard my own heart melt. "How many weeks?" I asked, my voice rough. "Just over 3 weeks. Harper says he's healthy, but she's not ready to call you. She just wanted you to see him for a moment." She swayed the baby gently. A light breeze carried warm milk scent and the damp green of the yard. My heart tilted. I thought I'd locked every emotional door after so many hurts. But standing there, looking at a brand new, guiltless life, I understood compassion hadn't vanished. It was simply learning not to be used. I drew a breath. Talia's words sounded clear in my head, as if she stood beside me. "Claudia, don't let a newborn become a bargaining chip. Love for your grandchild is different from letting his parents keep crossing lines." I nodded slightly, then spoke slowly. "Thank you for bringing him. Tell Harper and Dylan I bless Rowan. I hope he grows strong and is loved in the right way." The young woman blinked. "Would you like to hold him for a moment?" I looked at the child one last time. My whole body wanted to step forward, but I stopped. "Not today," I said with a gentle smile. "When things have healed, when the adults respect each other, I'll be the first to open the door." She nodded, eyes wet. "I understand. I'll tell her." I brushed the edge of the blanket, not his skin, leaving only a trace of cord, of warmth at my fingertip. "Welcome to the world, Rowan," I whispered. "May you grow up to love without fearing boundaries." Then I closed the door softly. The stroller wheels rolled away over the stone path, folding into the hush of wind in the trees. I stood still a long time, until my heartbeat steadied. Once the door was shut, tears came slow and heavy. I cried not from regret, but to say goodbye to an illusion that love can last forever if we keep sacrificing without limits. I sat, wiped my face, and felt hollow but quietly lighter. A while later, Maeve arrived. Seeing me, she asked nothing, just opened her arms and held me tight. "You didn't reject the baby," she said, warm and low. "You rejected the pattern of abuse. Those are 2 different things." I rested my head on her shoulder and laughed through tears. "You know, Maeve, for the first time in my life, saying no feels warm." She squeezed my hand and murmured, "Because it's a no, from someone who knows her worth." That afternoon, I opened the storage room and looked at the stack of boxes still labeled donation. The things Harper once marked to clear space for their future, now I chose to make it real. I loaded each box into Maeve's car. Inside were clothes, knit scarves, and a few small ceramics. There was no sense of loss, only release. We drove to the church on Lexington, where they run a program for new arrivals in town. The coordinator accepted the items, bowing thanks again and again. I smiled back and watched my things go into storage, not as seized property, but as gifts in the right place. On the way home, Maeve cracked the window. Pine and cinnamon drifted in. It felt like my house had been cleansed. That week, I returned to art class. When I hung the Blue Ridge piece on the easel, the instructor, Mrs. Lorna, paused for a long time. "This one has a very true calm, Claudia," she said. "Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from having weathered a storm." I smiled, relieved. Maybe I learned to paint with breath instead of memory. Mrs. Lorna nodded. "And that breath is telling me you've come back to yourself." The room went quiet for a few seconds, then soft clapping. I stood before the canvas, looking at the layered blue-violet ridges, gentle, distant, and stubborn. I saw myself there. That night at home, I opened a drawer and took out stationery. I hadn't handwritten a letter in years, but today I wanted to write to my 30-year-ago self, the woman who feared saying no, who thought silence was kindness. I wrote, slow and steady, "Dear 37-year-old Claudia, don't be afraid to say no. Refusal doesn't kill love. It only removes those who loved you for their benefit. When you say no, you're saying yes to respect, to the peace you'll find later. Don't forget you're strong not because you don't hurt, but because you can. Stand inside the hurt and refuse to let it define you." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, "To myself, who once mistook silence for virtue." Then I placed it in the wooden box with our wedding photo. That night I decided to make waffles, the dish I used to make only for guests. This time, I made it just for me. I mixed batter, cracked eggs, dusted in cinnamon and vanilla. The mixer hummed. Warm scent filled the kitchen. I ladled batter onto the iron and listened to the happy little sizzle. When the first batch was done, I plated it and drizzled honey. Crisp golden edges, soft center, gentle sweetness. I took a bite and closed my eyes. So this is what freedom tastes like: simple, warm, and delicious without needing anyone to share it. I took a photo and posted it in the Cooking for One group I joined a few weeks ago. Short caption, "Cinnamon Honey Waffles, a recipe for evenings alone but not lonely." Hearts rolled in, and a few comments popped up. "Looks so cozy. Miss Claudia, can we have the recipe? Not lonely, I love that." I smiled and typed back, "I'll post the recipe in the morning." Everyone deserves a batch made just for themselves. When everything was tidy, I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. Night air slipped through the curtains. Vanilla and honey lingered in the room. I lay down, warm under the covers, body loose. For the first time in ages, I could feel the weight of sleep like a smooth river stone resting in a stream, cool, round, and calm. Right before I drifted off, I said quietly in my heart, "Thank you, Evan. I kept the house." More than that, I kept myself. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply until dawn, in a home that held only truth, kindness, and the scent of fresh waffles. Time moved like still water. 3 months, then 6, no drama, no raised voices, just morning birds and the smell of coffee in the kitchen. I realized peace doesn't arrive all at once. It's built day by day. I set a new rhythm for myself. Monday mornings, gentle yoga at the community center where I practiced deep breathing, opening my chest, and letting go of what I can't control. Wednesdays, I tended the roses, trimming each cane, calling each bush by an old friend's name: Eleanor, Constance, Juliet. Friday afternoons, I went to Pack Library downtown for the seniors' book club. We read The Housekeeper and the Professor, then The Secret Garden, then Educated. Each book was a small mirror held up to my cracks, and instead of fear, I learned to look at them with compassion. Sometimes Dylan still appeared not directly, but through texts he sent via my brother, Marcus. One March evening, Marcus called, hesitant. "Dylan wants to know if you could help with a little money. He says Harper hasn't found a job yet, and baby Rowan is sick." I was quiet for a few seconds, looking out the window. Outside, late-season snow dusted the railing. I remembered the old days when Dylan had a fever and I sat up all night with a thermometer. I remembered Harper now, her face already fading in my mind. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Marcus, tell him this. Make a plan, get a job, then talk to me. No one rebuilds a future with an outstretched hand. I won't give money, but I'm willing to show him how to stand up." Marcus exhaled. "You're steady. Maybe that's exactly what he needs to learn." I smiled softly. "No, that's what I needed to learn. And it took half a life to learn it." In April, I repaired the back porch roof where rain had stained the wood. I hired 2 local workers, watched them, then helped paint the boards. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the first-of-season breeze, and the house looked like it was taking a long, healthy breath after a long illness. I replaced the smart lock, installed a doorbell camera, and set the auto alerts. For the first time in years, I felt the house was truly mine in safety, not fear. Each morning, when the doorbell chimed lightly because the wind tripped the sensor, I smiled. "Thank you, Evan. See? I'm keeping my promise." Money-wise, I steadied too. Savings held thanks to a small investment Talia helped me reset. I opened a second account and named it Rainy Day, for health and surprises only. Watching the number climb slowly each month, I felt like I was tending a tree I knew would bloom even if it took time. One evening, I posted in the Women Over 60 Thrive Together group, "When our children grow up, mothers have the right to grow up too. When they grow, we get to grow as well, grow our voice, our boundaries, our self-respect." I didn't expect it, but within a few hours, dozens of responses poured in. "Claudia, you wrote the words in my heart." "Thank you. I thought I was selfish, now I don't." The line, "Mothers have the right to grow too." I printed it and stuck it on my mirror. I read each line, my heart warm like I was hearing a chorus where I'd just sung the first note. Turns out I was never alone. There's a whole generation of women who've quietly endured and are now relearning how to stand tall. At the end of May, Maeve asked me to take a road trip along the Blue Ridge Parkway. "We deserve to see summer in the mountains, Claudie," she said, "and we don't have to ask anyone's permission anymore." I laughed. 2 weeks later, I bought a wide-brimmed straw hat and tied on a pale blue ribbon, a small reward for myself. The trip lasted 4 days. Winding roads, cool wind, wildflowers bursting on both sides. Sometimes we stopped at an overlook and silently watched a sea of clouds drifting. Maeve said, "Time stands with the steadfast, Claudie. It doesn't make us young again, but it gives the truth back." I turned to her and smiled. And that truth, in the end, is the only place we can sleep well. After the trip, I came home with different energy. I started painting again, not just one piece, but a trio. I named them Home, Boundaries, Freedom. Home is the wooden porch with slanting sunlight across the rose pots. Boundaries is a half-open gate with blue morning mist outside. Freedom is the Blue Ridge at sunset violet blending into orange, peaceful and wide. I hung the 3 pieces in the living room, right where Evan's wedding photo used to be. Not to replace it, but to continue it because I know even true love needs boundaries to last. One afternoon, Talia called. "Claudia, are you free next weekend? I'd like to invite you to speak at the community center. Topic is protecting the assets and rights of older adults. I think your story will inspire people." I smiled lightly. "I've never spoken in front of a crowd. Just talk like you're telling Maeve. The true story is always the strongest." I hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I'll try." That night, I practiced in front of the mirror. The room reflected a 66-year-old woman, silver in her hair, but bright eyes, a low, clear voice, steady. I looked at myself and said, "My name is Claudia Hart. I used to think old age meant losing the right to decide. I was wrong. The moment I dared to say, 'That's enough,' I started living honestly." I paused, breathed deep, then smiled. "Not bad, Claudia." The next morning, I printed my speech and marked breathing points in red. On the table sat a cup of chamomile tea and a new notebook. The cover read, "Keep growing." I opened the window. The early sun poured in, gold scattered across the wood floor. Outside, the roses blazed. Each bloom rose up without anyone teaching it how. I whispered, "Time has finally stood with us, not because we're stronger than anyone, but because we chose to be steadfast." The house was quiet, but I could hear my own heartbeat steady, sure, and calm. I knew the journey wasn't over, but I'd gone far enough never to return to the place where I was overrun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt not just surviving, but truly alive. One Sunday afternoon, as the sun slanted across the porch and gold light fell on each rose petal, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name saved. I was going to let it ring out, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" The voice was husky, slow, a little shaky. I held my breath. "Dylan?" On the other end, a few seconds of silence. Then quick breaths, like someone fighting back tears. "Yes, it's me. I don't know where to start." I sat on the wooden porch chair and watched the rose fence tremble in the breeze. "Start with the truth," I said softly. He drew a long breath. "Harper and we broke up. She moved back to her mother's. And me, I'm working at a gas station out near Boone. I'm renting a small room. Not much, just a bed and an old radio. But it's peaceful." Dylan's voice caught halfway through. I didn't jump in. I just listened. Listened, like you listen to a river that once raged and is finally slowing itself down. "Mom," he went on, hesitant, "I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not asking to move back in. I just wanted to say, you were right. I had to hit real life to understand what you did wasn't out of anger, it was to keep your dignity. Thank you for not letting me trample you." A light breeze swept across the porch, the rose leaves whispering. My eyes stung, but not from pain. For years I'd wished to hear an apology. When it finally came, I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to see my child bow to his own mistakes. I said quietly, "Dylan, I hear you. But you know, an apology is only the first step. Keep growing through your actions." "I understand," he answered, voice small as wind. "I'll try." "No, I will." Then silence. I heard a car engine somewhere and a radio in the background playing "Take Me Home, Country Roads," the song Evan used to sing along to whenever we drove the Blue Ridge. "Do you remember this song?" I asked. Dylan gave a faint, genuine laugh. "Of course, Mom. Dad used to play it every time we went on a picnic." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Old song. Never out of date like honesty." We didn't say anything else. We let the music and the wind fill the space. When the call ended, I set the phone down and looked out at the soft blue of the distant mountains. A valley wind rose, cool and true. It felt like the Blue Ridge was breathing with me lighter, no longer clenched around old resentment. I didn't forgive right away. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. But something in me shifted, like a long-shut window opening after a long winter. I stood and went inside. The room was full of afternoon light. Evan's Tiffany lamp glowed warm, dragonflies casting shadows on the wall. Whenever I look at it, I feel him there quiet, kind, gently nodding. "Do you see, Evan?" I whispered toward the mountains. "The boy is finally learning to be a real adult." I smiled, then turned back to the easel. A new canvas waited, unsigned. I took a brush and wrote in small, even letters, "Claudia Hart, 66, still here, I'm still here." Only 3 words, but a declaration. I'm still here after being pushed to the basement, after papers demanding control, after cold words. I'm still here, calm, clear, and free. I opened the window. The scent of climbing roses poured in. The house murmured with leaves, with wind, and with the sound of my own deep breath. I knew, from now on, this home belongs to the one who knows how to keep it. Not just me, but all the women who've been shoved out of the very places they built, just because kindness was mistaken for weakness. I sat down, poured myself an herbal tea, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Today my son called and offered his first apology." I didn't cry, didn't shake, I just smiled, knowing time has finally stood with the steadfast. Peace doesn't come from beating someone, it comes from not losing yourself. Outside, the sun sank behind the blue ridge. Orange mixed with purple across the porch roof, bathing the house in quiet color. I went to the yard, set the teapot on the wooden table, and sat alone watching the evening come slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt enough. Enough to forgive without forgetting. Enough to love myself again without fearing judgment. Enough to know that even without anyone's approval, I still deserve peace. I looked up and saw a new star appear small and bright. "Thank you, time," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes boundaries are the highest form of love." If you've listened this far, tell me, where are you watching from? Maybe each of us has been Claudia at some point when kindness is tested, when lines blur, when love and self-respect force us to choose. If this story touched you, leave a comment, tell me what you think, or if you've been through something similar. Every share, every like, every time you hit subscribe doesn't just help me continue this journey. It helps carry the stories of mothers who learn to say no a little farther. Thank you for walking the whole way with me, so that today, in a home full of sunset and roses, I can smile and say, I'm Claudia Hart, 66 years old, still here, still free. And at last, still at peace.